To every woman towing the starting line today, your body is powerful. Every month, your body goes through a cycle that creates, adapts, heals, and prepares for life. It is one of the most incredible biological process on earth. While it may sometimes bring challenges, discomfort, fatigue, and self-doubt, it is also a reminder of the strength you carry every single day. As runners, we often focus on pace, distance, and finish times, but real strength is showing up when conditions aren't perfect. Real strength is lacing up your shoes when you're tired, when your body feels different, when your energy isn't where you'd like it to be, and choosing to move forward anyway. Your cycle is not a weakness, it is a part of your story. Some days you may feel unstoppable, other days you may need to be patient. Listen to your body and give yourself grace. Both are signs of strength. The trail doesn't care if you're having a great day or a difficult one. It simply asks you to keep taking the next step. And time after time, women have shown they can do exactly that. So today, be proud of who you are. Be proud of your resilience. And be proud of your ability to adapt, endure, and overcome. Your body is not something to fight against. It's something to understand, respect, and appreciate. Whether you're running your first mile or your 100th mile, remember this. You are stronger than you think. You are capable of more than you know. And every step forward is proof of what women have always been capable of. Endurance, courage, determination, and heart. Keep moving, keep believing, keep showing the world what strong looks like. And above all, be proud to be a woman. Welcome in to Running Miles. I'm your host and coach, Josh. Today we're going to be talking about women's menstrual cycles and races, and figuring out, what's the best time during the month to race to give me the most performance. Obviously, sometimes maybe that doesn't matter to you and you just pick a race and it doesn't matter where you are in your cycle and you just race whether you're on your period or not. But if you are concerned about that kind of thing, hopefully this episode can help you out to when your body releases the chemical during the month that you need to have the ultimate performance on race day. So hopefully this episode can bring some knowledge and that kind of thing. And then if you are a coach like myself, you want to help the opposite sex as well. So for me, I would think that if I can only help 50% of the population in coaching, that would be really bad. So hopefully I can learn from this episode as well and help some female athletes, improve on their times or their goals just by learning more about the female body. So whether you're just listening in on more education, or if you are a female and want to have a better performance in the race, hopefully you'll find that out today. And then if you are a little bit older and you're going through some menopause, hopefully this episode can help you out. Real quick, the only things I really know is that I think it's the flaxseed will give you some estrogen if you eat flaxseed. So that should help during menopause. But other than that, I don't know too much. I think a benefit to women when they're running is that if you are regular, and your menstrual cycle, that if you are overtraining or under eating or you're stressed, then your body could be not regular anymore, and that could be a sign that you're stressed or you're not eating enough. So that's a great advantage over a man, to actually be aware of this and to think, hey, wait a minute, maybe I need more sleep, or maybe I need to eat more, because my cycles are not where they should be. So that's a great advantage if you can uncover what the issue is with that. So, I did want to read a funny story, so go ahead and do that. The woman who refused to quit. Sarah stood at the starting line of her first 50K ultra marathon, feeling confident. She had trained for months. She had her hydration pack. She had her nutrition plan. She had watched approximately 147 YouTube videos titled Ultra Running Mistakes to Avoid. She was ready, or so she thought. By mile 8, she had already questioned every life decision that led to her to this moment. By mile 12, she was negotiating with herself. If I quit now, technically, that's still exercise. By mile 18, she was convinced the race director had measured the course with a broken tape measure. There is absolutely no way this is only 18 miles. Then came mile 22. The wheels came off. Her legs hurt. Her stomach hurt. Her feet hurt. Even her ponytail somehow hurt. To make matters worse, she looked down and realized she had somehow spilled sports drink all over herself, and now had several bees following her down the trail. At that moment, she decided she was done, finished, retired. She would take up knitting. Knitting had chairs. Then an 82-year-old woman came jogging past her. The woman smiled and said, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Sarah stared in disbelief. The woman looked fresh, happy, practically floating. Meanwhile, Sarah felt like a raccoon that had just survived a tornado. The older runner disappeared down the trail. Sarah laughed. Then she laughed harder. Maybe this race wasn't about feeling perfect. Maybe it wasn't about having the perfect pace, the perfect nutrition, the perfect day. Maybe it was just about continuing to move. One step, then another, then another. So she kept going. She walked when she needed to walk. She ran when she could run. She smiled when she felt like crying. And a few hours later, she crossed the finish line, not because she was the fastest, not because she was the strongest, but because she refused to quit. That's the thing about women. They are stronger than most people realize. They show up, they adapt, they endure. They keep moving forward even when things don't go according to plan. And sometimes that's what strength looks like. Not perfection, not speed. Just take the next step, even when your ponytail hurts. All right. Yeah, you women are crushing it on the course and definitely doing great stuff out there. You guys are really crushing the ultra running distances. So keep moving, and hopefully this episode can help you out. So I'm going to go play it. And I did want to also mention thank you for tuning into the episode. Thank you for listening. If you like it, please follow. It only takes a second to do. And then if you do want my coaching services, I'll always leave it in the show notes. And then usually anything that this episode talks about that can be beneficial to y'all, I always put it in the show notes as well. And you can check that out. And hopefully it can just summarize up what you heard about. All right. So thanks again for being here. I know there's a lot of audiobooks out there and a lot of podcasts. So if you're listening to this, hopefully it can be really beneficial for you and help you to improve on the trails and the roads. All right. Thank you for listening.
Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis or like a biological process, there's this expectation of just extreme precision.
Right, like engineering.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you break your arm, you get an x-ray and it shows that jagged white line and the doctor just points at it and says, there it is, that's the problem. It's incredibly binary.
Broken or not broken.
Yeah.
It's clean, it's visible, and honestly, I think it's comforting. We really like human biology to be something we can easily categorize and just fix.
We do.
Yeah.
But then you step into the world of female physiology, specifically when it collides with extreme sports like ultra endurance running. And suddenly that pristine x-ray machine is just completely useless.
Totally useless.
Right. We're looking at a biological landscape that is, it's pretty murky for a lot of people because for decades, the menstrual cycle has basically been treated like a taboo or a barrier or, at best, just an inconvenience you have to manage.
Yeah, a liability.
Exactly. But welcome to the deep dive because today, our entire mission is to shatter that old narrative. We are going to decode the menstrual cycle, not as a liability, but as a deeply complex biological blueprint. Because if you understand it, it actually becomes this tactical superpower for female ultra-endurance runners.
It really does. It's a total game changer. And to build this blueprint today, we're pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources. We're looking at cutting-edge sports endocrinology, real-world field studies like the Fendora Project, which is this amazing study that evaluated highly trained endurance runners over long periods.
Yeah, the data from that is wild.
It is. And we're also pulling from some incredibly raw, unfiltered testimonials from elite athletes who are out there in the field, just pushing the absolute limits of human endurance.
So picture this, because this story from our sources completely blew my mind. And I think it perfectly sets the stakes for what we're talking about today. You are in the middle of the Moroccan wilderness.
Just brutal terrain.
Brutal. You're competing in the Atlas Mountain Race. It's a single stage, completely unsupported endurance race on a bike. And the heat is just blistering. You're totally isolated. And this is the exact situation ultracyclist Jenny Tuff found herself in when she got hit with basically a surprise period.
Right. And she had an IUD, which usually means she didn't get periods at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the timing here is just wildly poor.
It's the absolute definition of being caught off guard. You have zero infrastructure out there, zero support, and suddenly you have this massive biological shift.
Yeah. There are literally no bushes to hide behind in the desert. She has absolutely no tampons in her pack because, why would she? She wasn't expecting this. And to make matters even more complicated, she's riding with a group of male competitors.
Oh, man.
So she feels this immense psychological pressure to hide what's happening. She doesn't want to seem like she's, complaining or struggling or asking for special treatment.
Which is such a common feeling for female athletes in those spaces.
Totally. So eventually, she reaches this remote checkpoint, manages to somehow wash her bib shorts in a tiny sink, and she buys some incredibly thick, generic sanitary pads from a village shop, which, as you can imagine, do not exactly fit seamlessly into tight aerodynamic cycling shorts.
No, they really don't. And the mechanical friction of riding a bike for hundreds of miles with a thick, non-technical pad, it led to exactly what you'd expect.
Yeah, she ended up with the most horrific saddle sores of her life. But here is the part that really caught my attention in the sources. Jenny also mentioned that she was suffering from severe heat exhaustion. Like she was having dizzy spells and violent, uncontrollable shivers.
Right.
And in the moment, she just thought, the Moroccan desert sun is breaking me down.
Because that's the assumption most athletes would make. You're in the desert, you're hot, you feel sick. But stepping back to look at the broader physiological picture, a volunteer actually pointed out to her later that those specific symptoms, the dizziness, the shivering, the inability to regulate her body heat, those were likely caused by the physiological shifts of her period itself.
Wow.
Yeah, specifically the hormone crash associated with that exact phase of her cycle. The Moroccan heat was just the backdrop, Her internal environment was what was actually shifting so violently.
And that proves something absolutely crucial for anyone listening to this who pushes their physical limits.
Yeah.
In ultra endurance, sheer willpower is just not enough. You could be the toughest, grittiest athlete on planet Earth, but if you don't understand the internal biological machine you're operating, you are essentially flying blind.
You are.
So to stop flying blind, we have to start by taking a hard look under the hood. We really need to understand the internal mechanics and the phases of the menstrual cycle.
We do, because historically, male-centric sports science just treated female athletes as like small men.
Just smaller versions of the exact same machine.
Exactly. They applied the exact same training and fueling protocols and just expected the same results. But a female athlete's body is this incredibly dynamic, ever-changing endocrine system. I mean, a regular cycle spans anywhere from 21 to 35 days, and it's essentially split right down the middle by ovulation.
Okay.
So that gives us two main halves. You have the follicular phase and the luteal phase.
All right, so let's start with the follicular phase. That's roughly days 1 to 14, beginning on the very first day of bleeding. The sources referred to this as the low hormone superpower. So what exactly is happening in the body to make this a superpower state?
Well, during the early follicular phase, your primary ovarian hormones, so estrogen and progesterone, they drop to their absolute lowest baseline levels.
Okay.
And physiologically speaking, a female athlete's hormonal profile in this specific window actually very closely resembles a male's profile.
Really? Just from the hormone drop?
Yeah. Because progesterone is virtually absent, your core body temperature actually drops. Your body's ability to access stored carbohydrates, which we call glycogen, becomes highly efficient. Your recovery time is way faster, and interestingly, your pain tolerance is remarkably high right here.
So it's basically like getting a biological software update that temporarily unlocks premium speed, premium strength, and just a much higher threshold for suffering.
That is a perfect analogy. The engine is just totally primed for high performance.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you move out of that bleeding phase and into the late follicular phase, which is around days 6 to 12, things shift again.
What happens then?
Estrogen starts to surge rapidly, but progesterone stays low. Now, estrogen is highly anabolic. It promotes muscle protein synthesis and increases neuromuscular excitability.
Meaning your muscles are firing faster.
Exactly. This is your peak physiological window for maximal strength, really aggressive speed work, and highly intense interval training. Your body is actively building and just firing on all cylinders.
Okay, so that surge in estrogen drives us right into ovulation, which happens right around days 13 to 15. And the sources note that right here, estrogen and testosterone both peak simultaneously. So neuromuscular coordination is at its absolute maximum.
Right.
So my immediate thought reading this, and probably the thought of anyone listening right now who races, is if this is the undisputed peak for power and coordination, shouldn't every ultra runner try to schedule their 100-mile races exactly on ovulation?
I mean, on paper, looking purely at power output, you would totally think so.
Yeah.
But biology rarely gives you something for nothing. There is a massive physiological catch here.
Okay, what is it?
That huge surge in estrogen doesn't just build muscle. It fundamentally alters collagen synthesis. It causes what we call ligamentous laxity. It physically changes the stiffness and the elasticity of your tendons and your ligaments.
Wait, so it actually makes your joints structurally looser?
Exactly. Your joints become way more pliable. Evolutionarily, this is designed to prepare the body for potential childbirth. But in the context of, bombing down a really technical Rocky Mountain descent at mile 40, it's highly dangerous.
Oh, I bet. That sounds like a recipe for a twisted ankle.
It is. Because of that laxity, the risk of soft tissue injuries, sprained ankles, rolled knees, and specifically catastrophic ACL tears spikes significantly during the ovulatory phase.
Wow.
Yeah. So while your power is incredibly high, athletes must focus heavily on dynamic warm-ups and joint stabilization. You have a massive amount of horsepower, but the chassis of the car is temporarily unstable.
That is wild to think about. You're strong, but you're structurally vulnerable. Okay, so after ovulation, the egg drops,
Yeah.
and we cross over to the second half of the cycle, the luteal phase, which covers days 15 to 28. The literature calls this the high hormone furnace.
Yes.
Now, I get the high hormone part, but why a furnace?
Because of the introduction of progesterone. Progesterone takes over as the dominant hormone in the second half. And it acts directly on the thermosensitive neurons in your hypothalamus, the part of your brain that regulates heat.
Sure.
It literally turns up your internal thermostat. It raises your basal body temperature by roughly 0.5 degrees Celsius.
Now, 0.5 degree might not sound like much if you're just, sitting on the couch listening to this. You probably wouldn't even notice. But if you are 50 miles into a summer ultra, baking in the sun, 0.5 degree of baseline heat is massive.
It is genuinely massive because it alters your body's cooling mechanics. It delays your sweat response.
Meaning you don't start sweating when you normally would.
Right. Your body holds onto that excess heat far longer before it triggers the sweating mechanism to try and cool you down. So this dramatically increases your cardiovascular strain. Your heart is forced to beat much faster at your exact same normal pace, just to manage the trapped heat.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And furthermore, the combination of high estrogen and high progesterone causes a fluid shift. It reduces your blood plasma volume by about 8%.
Meaning your blood literally thickens. Like there's less liquid in the mixture.
Precisely. Thicker, more viscous blood means decreased stroke volume per heartbeat. Your heart has to work exponentially harder to pump that sludge-like blood out to your working muscles. This makes endurance efforts feel incredibly difficult.
I can imagine.
But beyond the heat and the blood, the metabolic shift in the luteal phase is perhaps the most critical hurdle for runners. Progesterone is catabolic, meaning it breaks down muscle tissue and it drastically alters substrate partitioning.
Which means what exactly for fuel?
It makes your body rely heavily on fat for fuel while actively suppressing your ability to store and mobilize glycogen in the liver and muscles.
Okay, I love an analogy, so let me try this. It's like you're driving a hybrid car and suddenly the car refuses to use the gas tank and only wants to run on the electric battery, which is great if you're going slow and steady on a flat road for a really long time.
Right.
But it's absolutely terrible if you suddenly need to floor it to pass someone or get up a steep mountain. You just don't have access to that high octane gear because the body basically locked it away.
That's exactly what's happening. Your body is guarding its carbohydrates. Biologically, it thinks it might need those precious carbs to support a potential pregnancy, so it blocks your muscles from using them.
So all those pre-race pasta dinners.
Exactly. This means traditional pre-race carb loading is highly ineffective during the mid-luteal phase. You can eat all the pasta you want, but your body simply won't store it as glycogen the way it normally would.
Man. So if we take all of this together, the body's internal environment basically becoming a furnace, your blood thickening up and stressing your heart, your access to fast energy being blocked, and then eventually the physical reality of bleeding itself. How do runners practically manage this in the wild? Because you can't just pause a 100-mile trail race. You have to keep moving. This biological challenge crashes right into a logistical nightmare, which takes us straight into the tactical gear. When you are out in the wilderness, what are the best actual products to rely on?
Well, the logistics of managing menstruation in the backcountry are incredibly complex, and choosing the wrong system can literally end your race. Let's look at the options: the good, the bad, and the genuinely brutal. According to recent athletic consensus and the sources we reviewed, the absolute gold standard right now is menstrual discs.
Discs specifically, not menstrual cups.
Yeah.
Because I feel like cups have been the standard recommendation for years now.
Cups are great for daily life because they have a high capacity, but they sit lower in the vaginal canal and rely heavily on suction to stay in place.
Okay.
So to empty a cup, you have to manually reach inside, pinch the cup to break that suction seal, remove it, empty it, and reinsert it.
And out on a muddy trail, when your hands are covered in dirt, sweat, and whatever else you've touched.
Right. Reaching inside your body poses a severe backcountry hygiene risk. Discs, on the other hand, sit much higher up. They are tucked entirely behind the pubic bone in the vaginal fornix. They hold up to 70 milliliters of fluid, which is roughly 6 times the capacity of a super tampon, and they can safely be worn for up to 12 hours.
But the absolute game changer with the disc, the thing that makes it perfect for ultra runners, according to the literature, is the hands-free aspect.
Yes, the auto-dumping or self-emptying feature.
How does that work?
When a runner bears down to urinate, the pelvic floor muscles naturally shift. This movement allows the front rim of the disc to temporarily untuck from the pubic bone and drain the fluid directly into the toilet or onto the trail without the athlete ever having to touch the disc with their dirty hands.
That's amazing.
And once they stand back up or simply do a Kegel, the rim tucks right back into place. For an ultra runner in a remote, unsterile environment, minimizing manual contact is absolutely critical for preventing infections.
That is just brilliant design. What about technical menstrual sportswear? The period panties, essentially.
They are excellent as a primary system for lighter days or as a fail-safe backup for heavier days when paired with the disc. The modern athletic versions are highly engineered now. They're built with anti-friction flat seams and sweat-wicking synthetic fabrics to keep moisture away from the skin.
So how do you manage them on a long race?
The logistics are pretty simple. You just stash a clean pair in your drop bags and swap them out at major aid stations every 6 to 10 hours. You take the saturated one, throw them in a waterproof zip-top bag, and carry them out.
Okay, so discs and technical wear are the ideal. Now we have to talk about the risks because this is where things get genuinely gnarly for runners who don't know better. Let's talk about tampons.
Tampons present a severe mechanical risk for ultra runners. And the issue isn't really the tampon itself, it's the cotton string that hangs outside the body.
Right.
During a 15 to 30 hour race, that string acts exactly like a wick. It absorbs everything sweat, urine, and highly abrasive salt crystals from dried sweat.
Oh, wow. So you basically have a salt-crusted string sitting between your legs while you take literally 100,000 steps.
Exactly. It acts like a saw against the highly delicate vulvar skin, causing severe debilitating blistering. We read accounts in the sources of athletes who were reduced to a walk because the friction shear was just so painful.
That's brutal.
If an athlete absolutely must use a tampon because it's all they have, the strict tactical advice is that the string must be physically tucked just inside the vaginal opening to prevent that external friction. Plus, ecologically, tampons are a nightmare on the trail. Under strict leave no trace rules, you must pack out every single one. You cannot leave biohazardous waste in the wilderness.
Which brings up the ultimate enemy mentioned in our sources. The thing that ruins more races than almost anything else, cotton underwear.
Oh, yeah.
Wearing cotton on an ultra is like wearing a wet sponge wrapped in sandpaper. It traps sweat, it traps blood, it never dries, and it will chafe you completely raw.
Chafing is a massive underreported cause of DNFs did not finish in ultras. Because what happens is the chafing pain forces you to subtly change your gait to avoid the rubbing.
You start limping a bit.
Right. And that altered biomechanical gait then overloads other muscles and tendons that aren't used to working that way, leading to severe cramps, IT band issues, and joint pain. A tiny patch of chafed skin can literally destroy your knee miles later.
Everything is connected. It really is. And since we're talking about the reality of being out in the woods, we really need to highlight the hygiene aspect. You mentioned leave no trace. You can't just auto dump a disc or empty a cup anywhere you want.
Absolutely not. The backcountry rules are strict for a reason. Any menstrual fluid must be emptied into a cat hole that is 6 to 8 inches deep. And crucially, it must be at least 200 feet away from any trail, campsite, or water source to protect wildlife and other hikers.
Right.
And this raises an incredibly important question of pathogen mitigation for the athlete. You must never rinse a cup or disc with unpurified river or stream water.
Because of the bacteria.
Yes. Introducing waterborne bacteria or parasites, like Giardia, directly into the vaginal canal can cause toxic shock syndrome or severe bacterial vaginosis. You only ever use filtered or boiled water to clean your gear.
So having the right disc or the right technical shorts is clearly just one piece of the puzzle. If you're going to survive and actually thrive for 100 miles while dealing with these hormonal shifts, you need a holistic battle plan. A series of tactical choices you make on race morning and throughout the event.
Precisely. You can't just wing it. Based on the sports science and athlete feedback, there is a very specific tactical methodology a female ultra runner should deploy on race day to manage her cycle and mitigate all the physiological disadvantages of that luteal phase.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's get right into those tactics because the preparation starts before you even hit the starting line. One of the biggest recommendations is building a specific, dedicated go kit for your pack.
Yes, tactic number 1.
You do not want your sanitary items just floating around loose in your running vest right next to your sticky energy gels and dirt-covered snacks. Your go kit needs to be a small, waterproof dry bag. Inside, you pack nitrile medical gloves, a small bottle of hand sanitizer, unscented biodegradable wipes, and this is key, a dedicated, small, soft flask of purified water that is used strictly for hygiene, not for drinking.
That hygiene flask is vital, so you aren't wasting your precious drinking water to clean your hands or your gear. And speaking of preparation before the race starts, skin protection is paramount. Tactic number 2.
What's the protocol there?
You need to pre-apply a heavy-duty silicone-based barrier lube, not a water-based one, because you will sweat a water-based lube off in the first hour. Products like 2Tom's Sport Shield create a literal sweat-proof film over the skin.
Got it.
And the pro tip from elite runners here is to use those single-use wipes at aid stations to gently clean off the dried salt and grit from your skin before you reapply the lube. If you just smear more lube over dried sweat, you are just aggressively rubbing salt crystals into your skin.
Ouch. Yeah, that makes total sense. Another major tactic, I guess this is number 3 that we have to address, is heat. We established earlier that the luteal phase raises your core temperature by 0.5 degree. So you are already operating at a thermal disadvantage before the sun even comes up.
You're starting in a deficit.
Right. You can't wait until you feel hot to start cooling down. You have to deploy proactive cooling strategies. This means utilizing ice bandanas wrapped around your neck, wearing white cooling arm sleeves, and dousing your head and chest with water much earlier in the race than you normally would. You are trying to put out the furnace before it overheats the engine.
Exactly. And if you do overheat, or if the uterine cramping starts, what you do next is a matter of severe medical importance. This is tactic number 4, and it's a massive warning from the literature.
This part blew me away.
When cramps hit on the trail, the immediate instinct for almost every runner is to reach into their pack for ibuprofen, naproxen, or aspirin, which are all NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs.
And that's what we're all taught to do for period pain in normal life.
Exactly. But normal life isn't a 100-mile foot race. During a long endurance event, your body diverts blood away from your internal organs, including your kidneys, and pushes it out to your muscles for movement and to your skin for cooling. This causes a natural state of renal vasoconstriction. Blood flow to your kidneys drops dramatically.
Okay, so the kidneys are already highly stressed just from the simple act of running.
Right. Now, to protect themselves from this dangerous lack of blood, your kidneys naturally produce vasodilatory prostaglandins. These act like tiny chemical wedges to force the blood vessels to stay open just enough to keep the kidneys functioning and filtering toxins.
Okay.
NSAIDs, however, work by entirely blocking the production of prostaglandins throughout the entire body. That's how they stop your cramps. But it means they also stop the protective prostaglandins in your kidneys. So if you take ibuprofen while you are dehydrated, heat-stressed, and running, you strip away your kidneys' only defense mechanism. The blood vessels clamp entirely shut.
That is terrifying.
It is. This exact combination routinely causes acute kidney injury, interstitial nephritis, and even total renal failure in ultrarunners. The medical advice is unequivocal. You must swap NSAIDs for acetaminophen, commonly known as Tylenol or paracetamol. Acetaminophen blocks the perception of pain centrally in the brain, but it does not affect those localized protective kidney prostaglandins.
That is life-saving information, truly. But let's say you've taken your acetaminophen, but the physical cramping is still debilitating. What's the alternative to pills? That brings us to tactic number 5. The sources suggest a physical intervention rather than a chemical one. Localized thermal therapy.
This is a great hack.
Yeah. You can buy those sticky, disposable heating pads, the kind usually sold for lower back pain, and stick them directly to your lower abdomen or lower back, underneath your race vest. While you run, the gentle heat promotes localized blood flow and actively eases the uterine's smooth muscle spasms. It's a low-tech, highly effective solution.
It really is, but managing pain is only half the battle, right? The other half is managing energy. Tactic number 6. Remember that hybrid car analogy?
Yeah, being locked out of the gas tank.
Right. If you are racing in the luteal phase, high progesterone blocks your access to your stored liver and muscle glycogen. Your internal engine doesn't have its usual reserves. Therefore, you must bypass the internal storage entirely. You have to fuel the engine externally.
What does that look like practically?
This means taking in 30 to 60 grams of exogenous carbohydrates per hour right from the very start of the race. Do not wait until you feel hungry or tired because your natural reserves aren't there to catch you.
And because your body is working so much harder just to process those exogenous carbs and manage the heat and pump that thicker blood, you have to completely rethink how you pace yourself. This is tactic number 7.
Right.
If you are racing in the luteal phase, you basically need to throw your heart rate monitor out the window, or at least just don't treat it as gospel. Cardiovascular strain and core temp are artificially elevated. Your heart rate will be significantly higher at your normal, easy pace. If you try to force your heart rate down to match your normal training numbers, you'll end up walking. You have to run by perceived effort, not by the watch on your wrist.
Absolutely. Effort is the truest metric there. Tactic number 8, going back to gear really quick, is tucking the tampon string if that's your only option, which we covered, but it's vital enough to put on the top 10 list.
Vital to prevent that blistering.
Exactly. And tactic number 9, to support that effort we just talked about, we have to talk about hydration. We mentioned that 8% drop in blood plasma volume, which makes the blood thicker and harder to pump. You cannot just drink to thirst to fix this.
So you have to force it a bit.
Yes, you have to actively defend your blood plasma volume by proactively increasing your fluid and sodium intake well beyond your normal thirst cues. You are intentionally trying to pull water back into the vascular system to thin the blood out and keep your cardiac output stable.
And the only way you know to execute all these specific luteal phase tactics, the early carbs, the heavy hydration, the cooling strategies, is if you know you are actually in the luteal phase. Which brings us to the 10th and probably the most foundational tactic of all, track to predict.
The baseline of everything.
Yeah, you can't prepare for a storm if you don't look at the radar. Using a tracking app like Fitwoman or utilizing the ecosystem built into smartwatches allows you to know exactly which phase your race day falls on, weeks or even months in advance. You can tailor your entire race strategy around that biological reality.
Tracking is the absolute foundation. But here's the reality check, right? You can have the perfect gear, a flawless pacing plan, and the best go kit in the world, but you cannot execute any of these tactics if your body's engine is starved of the specific raw materials it needs. The weeks and months leading up to the race are where the actual battle is fought. Let's look at the daily diet.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, fueling isn't just about dumping calories into a furnace to burn. It's about biochemical signaling. It's about giving your body the exact nutrients it needs to counteract the hormonal sabotage we've been talking about.
Right.
And the literature outlines a very targeted approach to whole foods and nutrients, designed specifically to support the female physiology under extreme athletic stress.
Let's run through the top 10 whole foods and nutrients.
Okay, and the most critical nutrient on that list, number 1, the one that female ultra runners constantly battle to maintain, is iron. Female runners face a brutal, compounding triple threat when it comes to iron depletion.
Okay, what's the first threat?
First, you obviously have the monthly blood loss from heavy menstrual bleeding. Second, you have foot strike hemolysis. This is the literal mechanical crushing and rupturing of red blood cells in the capillaries of your feet with every single step you take. When you run 100 miles, you are physically destroying your own blood cells. And the third threat is gut ischemia, right? Where the blood leaves the stomach during intense exercise, causing the gut lining to become slightly damaged and result in microbleeding in the intestines. So you are losing iron from 3 different directions simultaneously.
Exactly, which is why the dietary counterattack has to be aggressive. Consuming iron-rich whole foods like dark leafy greens, red meat, and lentils is non-negotiable. The clinical sources suggest female ultra runners need to target a ferritin level, which is the marker for your body's iron storage, above 35 to 40 micrograms per liter, just to function at a baseline athletic level without severe fatigue.
But eating the iron is only half the battle. Absorbing it is the other half. And this leads to number 10 on our list, which we'll jump to because it's a massive dietary blind spot for a lot of runners. Coffee and tea.
Oh, this is so important.
It's a crucial timing issue. Coffee and tea contain compounds called tannins and polyphenols. These compounds bind to non-heme iron in the gut and completely block its absorption. You could be eating a perfectly constructed iron-dense spinach and lentil salad. But if you wash it down with a cup of coffee, that iron passes right through your digestive tract completely unabsorbed. You end up anemic despite having a perfect diet simply because of when you drank your coffee. Keep the caffeine away from your iron-rich meals.
That timing is critical. Now, let's talk about macronutrients, specifically protein, which is number 2. It's not just about total grams of protein per day. It's about the specific amino acid profile. You need high-quality proteins like tofu, tempeh, or high-quality meats because you are trying to hit exactly 3 grams of the amino acid leucine per meal.
Why leucine specifically? What does that do?
2 reasons. First, leucine is the master biological trigger that initiates muscle protein synthesis. You need a high dose of it to combat that catabolic muscle breaking effect of progesterone in the luteal phase.
Okay.
Second, and this is fascinating, leucine actively competes with another amino acid called tryptophan to cross the blood-brain barrier.
Wait, like the tryptophan in turkey that makes you sleepy on Thanksgiving?
Exactly the same. During an ultramarathon, tryptophan enters the brain and converts to serotonin, which causes severe central nervous system fatigue. Your brain literally tells your body to shut down and go to sleep.
Wow.
By eating meals highly dense in leucine, the leucine crowds out the tryptophan at the receptors, keeping it out of the brain. You maintain mental sharpness and fight off that overwhelming fatigue. It's literally a battle of amino acids at the gates of your brain.
That is incredible. Diet as a neurological defense mechanism. Speaking of defense, let's talk about defending against that luteal phase glycogen block we discussed earlier. That's number 3. If your body won't let you use its stored carbs, you need fast-acting, easily digestible complex carbs that bypass the blockade.
Right, we need instant fuel.
A really interesting strategy championed in our sources comes from Stephanie Case, who famously won a 100-kilometer mountain race postpartum. Her secret weapon:
Watermelon. Watermelon, I love that.
it provides massive, fast-acting energy and critical hydration simultaneously. It requires almost zero digestive effort, which is perfect when your gut is stressed. And it gives the body immediate fuel when it refuses to tap into its own reserves.
It's a brilliant whole food solution. Another major dietary focus needs to be inflammation management, which brings us to number 4. We talked about how dangerous NSAIDs are for the kidneys, but you still need to manage the systemic inflammation and the severe cramps. This is where fatty fish and omega-3 fatty acids come in.
How do they help?
Consuming about 1 gram of omega-3s daily works to naturally inhibit COX2 enzymes. These are the specific enzymes responsible for the inflammatory cascade that causes period pain. By loading up on omega-3s, you are achieving a powerful, natural anti-inflammatory effect without risking your renal health.
And you can stack that effect with other anti-inflammatory foods, right? That's number 6 on the list. The literature heavily praises turmeric, specifically its active compound curcumin. It's a powerful phytochemical that acts as a natural intervention for dysmenorrhea, the medical term for severe uterine cramping.
Yes, stacking those nutrients is highly effective.
And for number 8, you can also deploy magnesium. Eating magnesium-dense foods or supplementing with magnesium glycinate acts as a natural, smooth muscle relaxant. Since the uterus is a smooth muscle, optimizing your magnesium levels significantly reduces the severity of the contractions, which drastically lessens the cramping.
Absolutely. And while we are adding things in, we also need to talk about what to aggressively balance, like sodium, which is number 5. Hydration isn't just about water, it's about electrolytes. Progesterone acts as an aldosterone antagonist.
Okay, what is aldosterone?
Aldosterone is the hormone that tells your kidneys to hold on to sodium. So when progesterone blocks it, your body initially excretes large amounts of sodium. If you don't aggressively salt your foods in the days leading up to a race, you will start at a deficit. Sodium is your best friend here because it pulls water back into the vascular system, expanding that depleted blood plasma volume.
Got it. And for number 7, you also need to heavily lean into antioxidant and fiber-rich vegetables, particularly in the premenstrual state. Fiber physically binds to excess hormones in the gut, specifically estrogen, and helps sweep them out of the body through digestion.
It's basically a cleanup crew.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This clears the system and reduces the inflammatory prostaglandins that cause massive bloating and premenstrual tension. Conversely, and this is number 9, the sources explicitly note that athletes need to avoid processed meats and heavy dairy in the weeks before a race.
Because they drive inflammation.
Right. These foods are highly pro-inflammatory. They drive up the inflammatory markers in the blood and severely exacerbate every single premenstrual symptom, making the cramps, the bloating, and the mood shifts exponentially worse.
So we've laid out the optimal blueprint. Track the cycle, fuel the specific amino acids, manage the iron, use the right gear. But what happens when athletes fail to fuel these specific needs? The body doesn't just keep quietly chugging along while slowly starving. It enters a state of deep biological triage. It looks at the massive energy expenditure of ultra running, looks at the lack of incoming calories, and shuts down the reproductive system entirely just to save energy.
And this brings us to a highly critical and, frankly, historically misunderstood area of female sports science. The system overrides. Let's look at the natural override first, which is REDS, or relative energy deficiency in sport.
This is so important to understand.
This happens when an athlete is in a state of low energy availability. Simply put, they are burning more calories than they are eating. And we are talking about clinical severe eating disorders here, right? The sources highlight that the margins are razor thin.
Razor thin. A sustained deficit of just 300 calories a day, which is practically just missing a post-run snack, can trigger this cascade. When the hypothalamus in the brain senses this ongoing energy deficit, it shuts down the production of gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH.
And what happens without GnRH?
Without GnRH, the entire cycle halts. Ovulation stops, menstruation stops. This is known as hypothalamic amenorrhea.
And the tragedy here is that for a long time in endurance running culture, losing your period was almost culturally validated.
Oh, absolutely.
It was seen as a badge of honor. You'd hear athletes say, "Oh, I'm training so hard, I'm so lean, my period stopped, I must be in peak race shape."
It was dangerously normalized by older generations of coaches. But losing a period is not a sign of fitness. It is a pathological state of starvation. The reproductive system shuts down because the body literally believes it does not have the resources to sustain life.
Wow.
And the hidden danger is what happens to the skeleton. Without the menstrual cycle, the body is starved of estrogen. Estrogen is the master regulator of bone metabolism. It inhibits osteoclasts, which are the specialized cells that naturally break down old bone tissue to be recycled.
So without estrogen there to keep them in check, these osteoclast cells basically go rogue. They just start aggressively eating away the skeleton.
Exactly. They demolish bone much faster than your body can rebuild it. The sources highlight the incredibly cautionary tale of elite obstacle and ultra runner Amelia Boone. She suffered from severe osteopenia, dangerously low bone density, which eventually led to catastrophic, career-halting bone stress fractures.
That is heartbreaking.
It is. And the harsh reality is that no amount of physical therapy, perfect running form, or expensive shoes can save your bones if your hormonal axis is completely shut down due to underfueling.
So looking at all these risks, the threat of bone loss, the temperature spikes, the ligaments loosening, the hygiene risks on the trail,
Yeah.
the obvious question jumping out at me, and probably everyone listening right now, is why not just take a pill?
Right.
Why don't runners just take hormonal birth control, turn the whole messy system off, and fix the problem?
That is the million-dollar question in female athletics today, and the answer is that pharmacological control is a massive double-edged sword. Let's look at the options, starting with combined oral contraceptives, the standard daily pill. These provide a steady, continuous synthetic dose of estrogen and progestin. Yes, you completely suppress the natural cycle, you lose the unpredictable bleeding, and you generally lose the severe cramps. But biologically, you create a hormonal flatline.
Right. It's like putting a speed governor on a high-performance sports car engine. You won't ever stall out on the side of the road, but you physically cannot hit top speed either.
That's exactly what the data shows. You lose the highly anabolic, superpowered peaks of the late follicular phase, where natural muscle synthesis, coordination, and recovery are fully optimized. You trade your highest peaks for a manageable but lower plateau.
Do athletes feel that difference?
They do. Many athletes on the combined pill report feeling chronically sluggish. They notice a measurable drop in their VO2 max, and they experience increased cardiovascular strain in the heat because the synthetic hormones still affect thermoregulation.
But the standard combined pill isn't the only option out there. The sources review several alternatives. You have progestin-only pills, often called the mini pill. Because they don't have synthetic estrogen, you avoid some of that flatlining effect.
True.
But the massive drawback the sources highlight is that they frequently cause unpredictable breakthrough spotting. And if you're out on a remote 200-mile mountain race, unpredictable bleeding is the exact logistical nightmare you are trying to avoid.
Then you have the intrauterine devices, the IUDs. The copper IUD is highly popular because it is entirely hormone-free. You keep your natural hormonal cycle, meaning you get to keep all those performance-enhancing follicular peaks.
But there's a catch with copper.
A big one. The physical drawback is severe. The copper creates a localized inflammatory response that often causes significantly heavier bleeding and much more painful cramping. This heavily exacerbates the iron loss and anemia risk we discussed earlier.
But then there's the hormonal IUD, like the Mirena, which actually gets a lot of praise in the sports science sources. How does that differ from the pill?
The hormonal IUD delivers progestin, but it is highly localized directly to the uterus. The synthetic hormone isn't being heavily processed through your entire bloodstream. So, for many women, it results in much lighter bleeding, or no bleeding at all, without causing those massive systemic drops in cardiovascular performance or VO2 max. You get the logistical benefit without fully sacrificing the physiological engine.
And we have to mention the Depo-Provera shot, because the sources raise a massive glaring red flag here for mountain athletes.
They do. Long-term use of the injectable depot shot has been strongly clinically linked to significant bone mineral density loss. If you are participating in a high-impact, load-bearing sport like ultra running, voluntarily compromising your bone density is essentially a recipe for a career-ending stress fracture.
So when you look at the whole picture, whether an athlete is intentionally trying to outrun their period through sheer calorie deficit or trying to medicate it away into a flat line with a pill, they are fundamentally fighting a system that, when understood and treated properly, is actually designed to make them stronger.
Precisely. The menstrual cycle isn't a flaw in the system. It is an incredibly intricate vital sign. When it is functioning optimally, surging and dropping exactly when it should, it is the ultimate indicator that the athlete is absorbing their training load, properly adapting to stress, and actively building strong bone and muscle.
So as we pull all of these threads together,
Yeah.
what is the ultimate takeaway for you listening to this deep dive? We've gone from the blistering desert sands of Morocco to the biochemical receptors in your brain. We've talked about the mechanics of menstrual discs, the dangers of NSAIDs, the battle of amino acids, and the vital importance of bone density.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. And the paradigm shift here is profound. The menstrual cycle isn't a curse to be hidden away in a Ziploc bag or starved into submission. It is a highly complex, totally predictable, and highly manipulatable biological system. If you track it, if you fuel its specific metabolic demands, and if you prepare tactically for the mechanical realities of the trail, you can hit a PR on literally any day of the month.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to really zoom out on this entire conversation. If we step back and look at the broader history of sports, for decades, male-centric sports science and culture treated the female hormone cycle as a fundamental liability.
Right.
It was an inconvenience that many believed actually disqualified women from elite long-distance running. But look at what is happening in the sport right now. Look at the incredible reality-breaking feats of women like Jasmine Paris, who recently won the brutally punishing 268-mile spine race outright, beating every single elite male in the field, all while actively stopping at aid stations to pump breast milk for her infant daughter.
That is just awe-inspiring.
Or look at Courtney Dahlwalter, who casually wins 100-mile and 200-mile races overall, leaving the men hours behind.
It's unbelievable.
Right.
And the realization is that they aren't succeeding in spite of their biology. They're operating in total masterful alignment with it.
Exactly. And that raises a massive question for the future of endurance sports. What if the true ceiling of human ultra endurance hasn't even been glimpsed yet? What happens to the record books in the next decade when an entire generation of female athletes stops fighting their biology, stops treating it as a taboo to be hidden, and actually starts weaponizing it?
That is an incredible thought to mull over as you head out for your next long run. Just like Jenny Tuff in the Atlas Mountains, looking around at the local women working under that intense Moroccan sun and realizing her body wasn't a burden failing her, but the very vehicle that possessed the power to carry her across continents. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We heavily encourage you to listen to your bodies, rethink how you structure your training, and weaponize your own physiology. Until next time.
Invest years into building a really high performance engine. You develop this, very reasonable expectation of reliability.
Right, you expect it to just work.
Exactly. You figure out the premium fuel that works best, you dial in the maintenance routine, and you know exactly how the parts handle stress. And you drive it on the same roads, and it performs flawlessly. Like input consistently equals output.
Until it doesn't.
Right, until it doesn't. Because when you step into the world of female endurance sports specifically, when an active, really dedicated female athlete enters her late 30s, 40s, or 50s, that predictable equation it shatters.
It completely falls apart. And it's so frustrating for them.
Oh, absolutely. Because you haven't changed a single variable. You're putting in the same miles. You're following the exact same periodized training plan it literally won you age group awards 3 years ago.
Yeah, but suddenly those same miles feel like you're moving through wet concrete.
Yes. And your recovery, which, used to take maybe a day, now it drags into the entire weekend. Your sleep is fragmented, your body composition is shifting, and your fueling strategy hasn't changed at all.
And that leaves so many incredibly fit women just staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. asking, am I just getting old?
Is my peak athletic window closed?
Right.
Which brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. If you are that dedicated female endurance athlete or ultra runner listening right now, the answer to "Am I just getting old?" is a definitive, resounding no.
No, not at all. Your biology isn't broken.
Your athletic career is far from over. You're simply operating a fundamentally different machine now, and you just need the updated user manual. So we're pulling from an incredibly dense stack of research today to write that manual for you.
And it's such vital research, too.
It really is. We're looking at the cutting-edge sports science of Dr. Stacy Sims, specifically her work in her book Next Level. We have a comprehensive PLOS1 study tracking the actual performance metrics of menopausal endurance athletes, plus clinical insights, and the latest performance nutrition guidelines.
And the overarching paradigm shift across all of these sources is just so crucial. I mean, women are not small men.
Right.
And a menopausal woman is not just an older version of her 30-year-old self. She is an entirely distinct physiological entity with a totally new set of rules.
So the rules of the biology have changed, which means the rules of the training absolutely have to change with them.
Exactly. If you try to force the old playbook onto the new physiological reality, you don't just stall your progress, you actively accelerate burnout.
Wow. So we have to understand the engine before we start rewriting that training plan. Yeah. Because this invisible wall that so many athletes hit, it's basically built entirely of hormones.
Yeah, we're talking about a massive systemic shift, specifically this really steep and often highly erratic decline in 17-beta estradiol.
Which is the most potent form of estrogen, right?
Right, alongside progesterone. And historically, science has just siloed these off as reproductive hormones, which does this massive disservice to how much they actually govern in an athlete's body.
Because it's not just about having a period.
No, calling estrogen a reproductive hormone is like, it's like calling the central nervous system just a pain receptor.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. It misses the vast majority of its function because estrogen is really a master physiological regulator. In a female athlete, 17-beta estradiol dictates core temperature regulation.
Wow.
Yeah, and it modulates the elasticity of your blood vessels. It acts as a signaling mechanism for muscle protein synthesis, and it heavily influences substrate utilization.
Meaning how your body chooses to burn, like glucose versus fat at different intensities.
Exactly. So during your peak reproductive years, estrogen and progesterone are providing this profound systemic scaffolding. It literally protects your cardiovascular and musculoskeletal systems against the immense stress of running, say, 50 miles a week.
And the sources outline a really concerning compounding effect here, which they call the RA-DES trap.
The relative energy deficiency in sport.
Right, which is basically what happens when you don't consume enough energy to support normal bodily functions, let alone athletic performance. And the data shows up to 40% of female endurance athletes experience hormone disruption just from their training volume alone.
Yeah, it's staggering. When you add the baseline stress of endurance training, it can drop estrogen and progesterone production by an additional 25 to 30%.
Wait, on top of the natural perimenopausal decline?
Yes. On top of it. So this is where we see the collision of an athlete's drive and their changing biology. I mean, an endurance athlete is already operating on the razor's edge of energy availability.
So when you enter perimenopause, the natural hormonal fluctuations start. And if you're simultaneously underfueling either intentionally to hit some perceived race weight or unintentionally because ultra running just burns an astronomical amount of calories, your body senses a crisis.
A huge energy crisis.
Yeah.
And, a lot of athletes historically internalized the loss of their cycle as a badge of honor.
Oh, totally. That old locker room mentality where if your period stops, it just means you're training hard and leaning out for race day.
Right. But structurally, looking at what's happening in the brain, viewing that as the success metric is incredibly dangerous.
So what's actually the mechanism there? Why does the brain shut it down?
It involves the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, or the HPO axis. So the hypothalamus is basically the body's chief financial officer for energy expenditure.
Okay.
And it relies on signaling molecules, particularly this hormone called kisspeptin, to monitor systemic energy availability. So when you're underfueled and overtrained, your fat cells produce less leptin and your adrenal glands pump out way more cortisol.
The stress hormone.
Right. And the hypothalamus reads all this data, sees a severe caloric deficit, and initiates an energy conservation protocol. It downregulates kisspeptin.
Which halts the signal to the ovaries.
Exactly. It stops the ovaries from producing estrogen and progesterone because it deems reproduction non-essential in a time of famine.
So the loss of the cycle isn't a sign of peak fitness at all. It's literally the blaring of a biological fire alarm.
Yeah, the body is shutting down the factory to save power.
And when an athlete suppresses those hormones through underfueling, and that overlaps with the natural menopausal decline, they are obliterating their own structural integrity. I mean, bone cannot remodel without estrogen.
No, it can't. We see a 3 times higher risk of stress fractures, profound fatigue, and just a complete stagnation in performance. I always say you simply cannot outtrain a failing hormone profile.
You cannot. Which fundamentally changes how we have to approach the cardiovascular demands of the sport, right?
Yes, because estrogen is highly protective of the blood vessels.
Yeah.
As we said, it helps keep the arterial walls compliant and flexible. So its decline changes the very nature of how the heart responds to exercise stress.
Which brings us to what is probably the most difficult psychological hurdle for a veteran endurance athlete: the death of the gray zone.
Oh, the gray zone. Yeah, this is a tough pill to swallow.
Right. Because the gray zone is that moderate intensity, steady state cardio, the pace that feels moderately hard, but you could hold it for 2 hours.
Time on your feet.
Exactly. For the last 30 years, that pace has been the absolute foundation of marathon and ultramarathon training. But Dr. Sims and the clinical research are unequivocal here for menopausal adaptations. That steady state gray zone is biologically useless.
It completely ceases to drive adaptation. Because without the protective compliance provided by estrogen, women experience increased arterial stiffness. Their autonomic nervous system response, which governs heart rate variability and the vessel's ability to dilate, is diminished.
So going out and running 10 miles at that familiar gray zone pace doesn't do anything.
Right. Your body is no longer experiencing sufficient stressor to force a positive physiological change.
It's like driving your car at exactly 40 miles per hour every single day. It's great for gas mileage, but it does absolutely nothing to upgrade the horsepower of the engine.
That's exactly it. And if we look at the mechanism of that lack of adaptation, the heart is a muscular pump, specifically the left ventricle.
Which takes the oxygenated blood and ejects it out to the body.
Right. And to improve endurance, you need to improve stroke volume, the sheer amount of blood pushed out per beat. When you're 25 and swimming in estrogen, steady state cardio provides enough of a gentle stimulus to encourage that left ventricle to stretch and become more elastic.
But as the estrogen fades, you need a different tool.
You need a blunt instrument. You have to force the left ventricle into eccentric hypertrophy, which is that healthy remodeling and stretching of the chamber. And without estrogen, the heart requires a massive acute stress to do that.
A huge volume of blood rushing through the chamber.
Which forces the tissue to adapt.
Yeah.
And that absolute requirement dictates the shift to polarized training.
Okay, so polarization means the vast majority of your training, like 80%, needs to be incredibly embarrassingly easy, pure recovery pacing. And the other 20% needs to be maximal eye-bleeding effort, sprint interval training or SIT. We are completely abandoning the moderate middle.
You have to. The stimulus must be severe enough to force the central governor in the brain to recognize the demand and allocate resources to upgrade the cardiovascular hardware. Maximum effort sprinting is the only way to get that sheer volume of blood return.
But the sources establish a very specific parameter for these sprints, which is the 30-second rule. And honestly, this is where the psychology of an ultra runner really clashes with the biology.
Oh, big time.
Because if I'm training for a 50-mile race with 10,000 feet of elevation gain, the idea of doing intervals that only last 30 seconds feels, almost insulting to my fitness level.
I hear that all the time.
It feels like I haven't even warmed up the engine by the time the interval is over. So how do we reconcile the endurance mindset with this super brief biological limit?
It requires understanding the difference between the mechanical pathways of adaptation and the hormonal cost of accessing them. When you execute a high-intensity interval, you're trying to activate a cellular pathway called AMPK.
Which drives mitochondrial biogenesis, making new mitochondria for energy.
Exactly. However, when you extend a high-intensity work interval beyond 60 seconds, your body begins to rely really heavily on the anaerobic glycolysis system, and that rapidly drives up systemic cortisol levels.
And cortisol, the primary stress hormone in a vacuum, it isn't inherently evil, right? It mobilizes glucose, increases alertness, gets you ready to fight or flee.
Sure, in a vacuum, but we aren't in a vacuum. Menopausal women already have a significant disruption in their autonomic nervous system. Because estrogen and progesterone interact with the brain's ability to clear cortisol, the baseline stress level for a menopausal athlete is already elevated.
So they have a much harder time bringing their nervous system back to a calm parasympathetic state after a stressor.
Right. So if you prescribe long, grinding, 3-minute VO2 max intervals, you're inducing this massive cortisol spike that the menopausal body just cannot efficiently clear.
And chronic lingering cortisol is basically catastrophic for an athlete. It promotes visceral fat storage, it inhibits human growth hormone, and it actively breaks down muscle tissue into glucose.
It actively dismantles the engine you're trying to build.
Exactly. So the 30-second sprint is kind of the biological loophole. By keeping the explosive effort to 30 seconds or less with ample recovery, you stimulate that AMPK pathway for cardiovascular adaptation, but you stop the interval before you trigger the massive cortisol release.
Exactly. Over a period of weeks, executing 30-second SIT actually lowers baseline cortisol levels. It improves insulin sensitivity and provides a natural spike in testosterone and human growth hormone,
which are essential for recovery. So practically an ultra runner might do, say, 3 sets of 4 30-second all-out hill sprints with a really generous 90-second recovery between reps to drop the heart rate.
Yes, and maybe 5 minutes of easy spinning between sets. The physiological return on investment for that brief, brutal work is infinitely higher than grinding out a 45-minute tempo run.
That is wild. It's the most effective way to rebuild cardiovascular compliance after the estrogen drop. So that addresses the internal pump, but we have to bridge that to the structural chassis of the body, the muscles and bones.
Right, because we have to apply a similar strategy there.
Because the PLOS1 study in our stack points out this harsh reality, 63% of menopausal endurance athletes report an increase in joint and muscular discomfort.
And that discomfort is the early warning sign of sarcopenia, the loss of muscle mass, function, and quality. Because muscle tissue is incredibly dynamic, right? It's constantly being broken down and rebuilt. And estrogen is heavily involved in signaling that muscle protein synthesis.
It's like the amplifier that tells the satellite cells to repair damage and build stronger tissue. And when estrogen drops, that amplifier is turned off.
It goes completely silent. And endurance running, by its very nature, is catabolic. It breaks tissue down. A lot of runners assume that simply carrying their body weight over 30 miles of trails is enough resistance to maintain their leg strength.
But it's not.
No. The data shows that without the estrogen amplifier, endurance running alone cannot prevent sarcopenia and can actually accelerate it if protein intake is insufficient.
So how do we artificially turn that amplifier back on?
We use what is honestly one of the most fascinating workarounds in human physiology. The central nervous system bypass.
The CNS bypass. I love this concept.
If the hormonal pathway to signal muscle growth is compromised, you have to use the neurological pathway to send the exact same command. And the only way to trigger that CNS pathway is through high-load, low-repetition resistance training.
Heavy weights.
Very heavy weights.
And we need to define heavy carefully because a lot of endurance athletes think lifting means 3 sets of 15 reps with a moderately challenging dumbbell focusing on muscular endurance.
Muscular endurance lifting will not trigger the CNS bypass. The weight must be heavy enough that the athlete reaches absolute mechanical muscular failure by the 5th or 6th repetition. If you can physically lift it 8, 10, or 12 times, the load is too light.
You're just not recruiting the highest threshold motor units. No, the immediate skepticism from the ultra running community is usually twofold here. Time and mass.
Oh, the bulk myth.
Yes. Ultra runners spend a dozen hours a week on the trails. Adding heavy gym sessions feels impossible. And more importantly, there's this deep-seated fear that lifting heavy weights will result in bodybuilder-style hypertrophy. They don't want to put on 10 pounds of dense muscle that acts as an anchor on a 3,000-foot climb.
Right. But we have to dismantle that fear with biological reality. Lifting heavy weight at low repetitions, particularly for a woman in a low estrogen environment who is also doing massive volumes of cardio, does not create bulk. The biological environment simply does not support it.
So what are you actually doing then?
You're altering the neurological recruitment of the muscle. It's an upgrade to the software, not the hardware.
Okay.
When you lift a near maximal load, your brain realizes the standard slow twitch fibers are insufficient. So the central nervous system has to increase its rate coding, the speed at which it sends electrical signals to the muscle. It's forced to recruit dormant, high threshold, fast twitch muscle fibers that were previously just sitting idle.
So you aren't making the physical muscle fibers significantly larger. You're just teaching your brain to use 100% of the muscle you already have instead of the normal 60%.
Exactly. And that increase in neuromuscular efficiency translates directly to the trail. You generate more power per stride, which improves running economy. But crucially, you also create the joint stability necessary to handle repetitive impact.
And we haven't even touched on the skeletal benefit yet, which brings in Wolff's Law.
Right. Wolff's Law states that bone will adapt to the loads under which it is placed. Osteopenia and osteoporosis are massive threats during menopause because estrogen regulates osteoclast activity.
The cells that break down old bone.
Exactly. Without estrogen, breakdown outpaces rebuilding. But when you put a heavy barbell on your back and squat, the mechanical deformation of the bone triggers osteoblasts, the cells that build new bone, to lay down more minerals. Heavy lifting is literally the most potent defense against skeletal fragility.
Okay, so we have the new training matrix established. 30-second cardio sprints to remodel the heart and heavy 5-rep resistance training to bypass the estrogen deficit and fortify the bones.
Yeah.
But you can apply all the mechanical stress in the world, and if you don't provide the biological building blocks to repair that stress, the entire system collapses.
Yeah.
So we have to pivot to the absolute foundation of ultimate performance during menopause: fueling and nutrition.
And this is a massive shift, primarily due to a condition called anabolic resistance.
Right. So when you're 25, the cellular machinery for building muscle is incredibly sensitive. Like 15 grams of protein from a light snack is enough to flip the metabolic switch.
But in menopause, that cellular machinery becomes hard of hearing. It requires a significantly louder, more concentrated signal to initiate the exact same repair process.
And that louder signal specifically means the amino acid leucine. Leucine is the biochemical key that unlocks the mTOR pathway, which drives muscle growth.
Right, so to get enough leucine to turn the key in a menopausal body, the total protein dosage has to be much higher, and the timing is incredibly precise. The clinical protocol demands 20 to 40 grams of high-quality protein containing roughly 10 grams of essential amino acids, consumed within 30 to 40 minutes of finishing a workout.
And that time frame isn't just arbitrary, right? It's dictated by insulin sensitivity.
Yes. As estrogen drops, women frequently experience a decrease in insulin sensitivity. Their bodies are less efficient at using insulin to shuttle glucose and amino acids into the cells. But immediately following intense exercise, the muscle cells utilize specialized transporters called GLUT4.
Which pull nutrients in completely independently of insulin.
Exactly. It's an insulin-independent window. The door to the cell is propped wide open by the mechanical stress of the workout. But that door closes rapidly. If you wait 2 hours to eat, that phase is over.
And then you miss the optimal repair window because you're relying on that blunted insulin response again. And zooming out from just the post-workout window, the daily total protein goal needs to hit 2.0 to 3.0 grams per kilogram of body weight.
Which is a huge amount.
It is. For a 140-pound ultra runner, that's upwards of 130 to 190 grams of protein a day. That requires militant, conscious effort. You have to build every single meal around protein. So to make this intensely practical, let's go through the definitive list from the research. The top 10 whole foods for ultra runners navigating menopause.
Let's do it. And the first 4 are your foundational building blocks, prized for their bioavailability and complete amino acid profiles.
Okay, number 1, eggs.
The gold standard for biological value. Highly digestible protein and a rich supply of leucine to trigger that mTOR pathway.
Perfect. Number 2, Greek yogurt.
Beyond just the dense protein, it gives you critical calcium for the bone remodeling we just talked about, and live cultures to support the gut microbiome, which is going to be incredibly important in a minute.
Number 3, fatty fish, specifically wild-caught salmon or sardines.
These provide protein alongside massive doses of omega-3 fatty acids, which you absolutely need to combat systemic inflammation and keep the joints healthy.
And number 4, poultry, like chicken or turkey breast.
Just highly versatile, lean vehicles for hitting those massive daily protein targets without taking on excess saturated fat.
Okay, so those first 4 handle the structural repair, but an ultra runner still needs immense amounts of glycogen for long efforts and fiber to manage the gut. So the next 3 focus on complex carbohydrates and soluble fiber. Number 5, oats.
Oats provide a slow, sustained release of glucose, which helps manage the blood sugar swings that are so common in menopause. Plus, they contain beta-glucan, a type of fiber highly beneficial for cardiovascular health.
Number 6, chia seeds.
A strategic tool for ultra runners. They're hydrophilic, so they absorb immense amounts of water, aiding in systemic hydration while providing excellent bowel motility.
And number 7, cooked root vegetables. Sweet potatoes, carrots, squash, and the specification of cooked here is super vital, right?
Extremely vital. Raw, insoluble fiber can be incredibly abrasive on the digestive tract, especially when blood is being diverted away from the stomach during a 5-hour trail run. Cooking them breaks down the cellular walls, making the carbs easily accessible while remaining gentle on the gut.
Makes total sense. So that's 7 foundational foods. But the final 3 spots on this list are where the nutrition science directly intersects with endocrinology. We have to talk about raising estrogenic activity through whole foods.
Yes, phytoestrogens.
This is such a fascinating mechanism.
Right, because phytoestrogens are naturally occurring, plant-derived compounds that are structurally remarkably similar to 17-beta-estradiol. Because their molecular shape literally mimics estrogen, they can physically bind to the estrogen receptors distributed throughout your body. Exactly. And the human body contains different types of estrogen receptors, primarily ER alpha and ER beta. Human estrogen binds strongly to both, but phytoestrogens have a much higher affinity for the ER beta receptors,
which are heavily concentrated in the central nervous system, the cardiovascular system, and the bones.
Right. So when phytoestrogens bind to these receptors, they exert a mild, stabilizing estrogenic effect.
They act as a biological placeholder. Like the primary factory shut down the assembly line, but by eating phytoestrogens, you're importing a slightly milder replica to keep the machinery running. So what are the final 3 foods that provide this?
Number 8 is tempeh. Number 9 is miso. Both of these are whole fermented soy products rich in a type of phytoestrogen called isoflavones. And number 10 is ground flax seeds, which contain a different class of phytoestrogens known as lignans.
And the clinical data supporting these is incredibly compelling. Like the WAVS study, the women's study for the alleviation of vasomotor symptoms, they tracked menopausal women and basically gave them half a cup of cooked organic soybeans daily.
And the results were astounding. An 84% reduction in moderate to severe hot flashes.
84% just from soy.
Yes. But the methodology of that study highlights a crucial secondary system, the gut microbiome. When you consume the isoflavones in tempeh or miso, they don't just passively enter the bloodstream. The bacteria in your gut actively metabolize those isoflavones and convert them into a highly potent secondary compound called equal.
And equal is what actually provides the relief from hot flashes.
Exactly. But your body can only produce equal if you possess the right strains of gut bacteria.
Which perfectly connects back to why we included oats, chia seeds, and fermented Greek yogurt on the list. You have to feed the gut microbiome the soluble fiber it needs so that the bacteria are present and capable of making equal.
It's an entirely interconnected ecosystem.
It really is. So just to recap the top 10. Eggs, Greek yogurt, fatty fish, poultry, oats, chia seeds, cooked root vegetables, tempeh, miso, and ground flax seeds. Mastering that list gives you the structural repair and the hormonal placeholder you need.
But fueling the system is only half the battle on an ultra event. The other half is thermal management. We have to address the coolant system.
Oh, absolutely. Because so many menopausal athletes report a sudden, drastic inability to handle heat. A 75-degree training run that used to feel pleasant suddenly feels like running inside a literal oven. The internal thermostat just appears completely broken.
To understand that breakdown, we have to look at the baseline differences in thermoregulation between men and women, even before menopause. Women naturally heat up much faster at equivalent levels of dehydration.
They have a lower total body water volume, right?
Yes, at a different sweat gland density, meaning their evaporative cooling mechanism is inherently different. So when you introduce the menopausal hormone drop, you compromise the fluid balance even further.
Because estrogen and progesterone are deeply intertwined with how your body manages fluid and sodium?
Right. Estrogen helps the body retain water, maintaining the fluid volume of your blood. Progesterone interacts with aldosterone, which regulates sodium excretion in the kidneys. As those hormones plummet and fluctuate, the body loses its ability to hold on to water efficiently. The absolute volume of your blood plasma drops.
And when your blood plasma volume drops, your blood literally becomes thicker, more viscous. So during a hot run, your heart is trying to pump blood to your working muscles for oxygen, but it also has to pump blood to your skin so you can sweat and transfer heat.
And with a lower, thicker blood volume, the heart just cannot adequately supply both. The skin gets shortchanged, sweating decreases, and your core temperature skyrockets.
Which is why a reactionary hydration strategy is totally doomed. You can't just drink water when you feel thirsty.
No, because the biological mechanism that triggers thirst is blunted with age. By the time a menopausal athlete actually feels thirsty on a run, her core temperature is already in the danger zone, and her plasma volume is compromised. The solution has to be an aggressive pre-hydration protocol.
The sources outline a strategy of preloading the system the night before a long run. Consuming high sodium fluids like a robust miso soup, which does double duty with the phytoestrogens, or heavy chicken broth.
The high sodium content forcibly pulls fluid into the vascular system and holds it there, artificially expanding that blood plasma volume before you even take a single step.
And during the exercise itself, the clinical target is 0.12 to 0.16 ounces of fluid per pound of body weight per hour. For a 140-pound athlete, that's roughly 17 to 22 ounces an hour. But it cannot be plain water.
Drinking plain water during an ultra is incredibly dangerous for this demographic. Menopausal women are highly susceptible to exercise-associated hyponatremia,
which is when the concentration of sodium in your blood drops to abnormally low levels. Because if you're sweating out sodium and replacing it solely with plain water, you're actively diluting the remaining sodium in your bloodstream.
Exactly. The cells begin to swell with water. In the extremities, this causes severe bloating. If it progresses to the brain, it can cause confusion, seizures, and can literally be fatal. So the hydration must be heavily fortified with electrolytes, specifically high concentrations of sodium, to match that altered sweat composition.
You're managing a highly sensitive chemical equation on the run. So we've detailed the physical mechanics, rebuilding the heart, bypassing the muscles, managing the gut, hyperhydrating. But there is a final critical layer here. We have to talk about managing the mind, controlling the emotions, and preserving mental resilience.
Because the PLOS-1 study highlights a really devastating reality. Up to 88% of menopausal athletes report severe sleep disruptions, and 83% report profound physical and mental exhaustion.
When your body feels alien and your anxiety just spikes out of nowhere, how do you maintain the mental fortitude required for ultra running?
Well, the very first step to emotional control is removing the guilt. Athletes often view a sudden lack of motivation or brain fog or irritability as a lapse in mental toughness. They treat it as a character flaw, which it isn't.
It is not a character flaw. It is a biological phenomenon known as brain hypometabolism.
Brain hypometabolism.
Yeah.
So we have to look at the brain's energy demands. The brain runs almost exclusively on glucose. And estrogen, specifically estradiol, plays a massive role in facilitating glucose transport across the blood-brain barrier.
It acts as the key to the cellular gates in the brain. As estrogen levels drop during perimenopause, those gates begin to close. The brain physically struggles to access its primary fuel source. It's literally equivalent to a brownout in a major city grid.
The power supply drops.
Exactly. And the areas of the brain most densely populated with estrogen receptors, the hippocampus, which governs memory, and the amygdala, which processes emotional responses and anxiety they experience in energy crisis.
The brain is starving for fuel. That perfectly explains the profound fatigue, the sudden inability to regulate emotions, and that classic brain fog where you walk into a room and just completely forget why. And this energy crisis also triggers neuroinflammation. Over the long term, particularly for women with the APOE4 gene variant, which is a strong genetic risk factor for Alzheimer's supporting brain energy, becomes paramount.
So when we discuss top ways to control emotions and support ultimate performance, we're really discussing how to resolve this neurological energy crisis. And the absolute foundation of that is sleep hygiene. You cannot out-meditate a destroyed sleep architecture.
You really can't. The brain clears metabolic waste and consolidates emotional learning during deep sleep. If you're part of that 88% suffering from sleep disruption, your brain is drowning in fatigue. And the primary culprits are vasomotor symptoms, hot flashes, and night sweats.
Sudden, intense spikes in core temperature. So the sleep environment must be ruthlessly optimized, keeping the bedroom exceptionally cold, using breathable cooling fabrics, and removing metabolic disruptors before bed.
Beyond the environment, targeted supplementation can really support sleep architecture. L-theanine is an amino acid that promotes a relaxed parasympathetic state without acting as a heavy sedative.
And tart cherry juice is another strategic tool. It naturally contains melatonin, and its high anthocyanin content acts as a powerful anti-inflammatory for joint recovery,
addressing the brain and the body simultaneously. And once sleep is protected, the next crucial step is circadian alignment. The menopausal body is highly sensitive to circadian disruption.
You have to anchor your biological clock, so exposing your eyes to natural morning sunlight within 30 minutes of waking.
Right. The specific light wavelengths hit the melanopsin receptors in your eyes, sending a signal directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain. This regulates your daily cortisol spike, ensuring you're alert in the morning and properly winding down at night.
And circadian alignment also dictates your training schedule. We discussed the massive cortisol release from high-intensity intervals. If you do those 30-second sprints at 6:30 p.m., your cortisol and core body temps stay elevated well into the night.
It actively destroys the calming tone required for deep sleep. The intense training must be moved to the morning or early afternoon, leaving the evening strictly for down regulation.
Train hard early, recover fiercely late, which emphasizes active stress resilience, yoga, breath work, or working with a sports psychologist. Menopausal athletes have a significantly reduced tolerance for systemic stress.
Their recovery budget is smaller. You can't pile intense training, professional stress, and sleep deprivation onto the same plate without the system breaking.
Which brings us to the most powerful medical intervention discussed in the literature, menopause hormone therapy, or MHT. And we need to frame MHT correctly. It is not a performance-enhancing drug or a shortcut to ignore poor diet or lazy training.
You cannot slap an estradiol patch onto a foundation of poor sleep and expect magic. But the clinical consensus is crystal clear. MHT is the most highly effective treatment for severe vasomotor symptoms.
If hot flashes are destroying your sleep, MHT addresses the biological root cause.
And the cascade effect is profound. The hot flashes stop, sleep is restored, brain hypometabolism is mitigated, emotional regulation returns, and the muscles can actually repair from the training. For severe symptoms, consulting a sports endocrinologist about MHT is a vital step.
So we've journeyed through an immense landscape today to distill this down to the ultimate performance formula. First, abandon the gray zone. Implement polarized training featuring 30-second SIT to remodel the heart without chronically elevating cortisol.
Second, bypass the estrogen deficit in the muscles and bones by utilizing heavy 5-rep maximum resistance training.
Third, combat anabolic resistance with immediate post-workout protein feedings of 20 to 40 grams. Maintain a massive daily protein intake and strategically deploy phytoestrogen-rich whole foods like tempeh, miso, and flax seeds.
Fourth, utilize hyperhydration with high sodium to counteract the loss of blood plasma volume.
And finally, protect the brain from hypometabolism through militant sleep hygiene, circadian alignment, and when medically appropriate, hormone therapy. It is a complete tearing down of the old rules.
It's a fundamental paradigm shift. Society often frames menopause as a decline, the twilight of an athletic career. It is not. It's simply a biological transition. It's an invitation to strip away the garbage miles and rebuild yourself into a vastly more intelligent, precise, and resilient athlete.
And as we close, I want to leave you with this deeply provocative concept from evolutionary biology called the grandmother hypothesis. Female humans are one of the only species on Earth that live for decades past their reproductive capacity. Why?
It's fascinating.
Postmenopausal women were the ultimate endurance foragers of early human tribes. While younger members were tethered to the camp by pregnancy and nursing, the mature women, free from the energy demands of reproduction, were the ones built to travel massive distances, navigate complex terrain, and gather resources to ensure survival.
Your body was literally forged by millions of years of evolutionary pressure to go long distances and to thrive in this exact phase of life.
You are not fragile. Your biology is not broken. The engine did not fail. You simply needed the updated user manual. And now that you have the science, the nutrition, and the training parameters to operate this upgraded machine, what could you possibly accomplish next?
That evolutionary perspective is an incredibly powerful mindset to carry into the next training block.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the science of female endurance. Keep pushing the boundaries, keep lifting heavy, and we will see you next time. A medical diagnosis, or even when we look at sports science, there's this really ingrained expectation of like precision.
Right, like
or it's not.
Yeah, we naturally really like things to be visible and neatly categorized.
Right, we do. And for decades, we've basically liked to think of the human body as this simple, predictable combustion engine. You put fuel in the tank, you press the gas pedal, and you just get a consistent amount of horsepower out.
Which is a very comforting thought, honestly.
But then you step out of that rigid framework and into the world of female physiology and like endocrinology and athletic performance, and suddenly that binary X-ray machine is just utterly useless.
Oh, completely useless, yeah.
That simple combustion engine we've based literally all our training models on. It turns out it actually changes its entire structural composition, its fuel preference, and its optimal operating temperature every single week.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters, especially when viewed through the traditional highly rigid lens of sports science.
Yeah, which we've been stuck with for so long.
Right, because for decades, the research simply wasn't there.
Yeah.
I mean, the default prototype for nearly all exercise physiology research was like a 70 kilogram college-aged male.
Which is just wild to think about now.
It really is. And the scientific community essentially looked at female athletes and just assumed they were smaller versions of that 70 kilogram male.
Just scale it down, it'll be fine.
Exactly. They actively ignored the variables that make female physiology distinct because those
Hormonal fluctuations and stuff.
Yeah, the hormones, the changing biomechanics, they basically ruined their clean data sets.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because treating women as, smaller men isn't just slightly scientifically inaccurate, it's a fundamental paradigm failure.
It actively holds athletes back.
It really does hold them back from their true potential. And that is exactly what we're going to dismantle today for you. We are going to tear down those outdated male-centric models and rebuild an understanding of female athletic training from the ground up.
Which is so incredibly necessary.
Yeah, it's overdue. We're pulling from an incredible stack of material you shared with us for this deep dive, like clinical paradigms, insights from leading researchers, physical therapy guidelines, and actual dispatches from the front lines of ultra running.
It's a really comprehensive look at the subject.
It really is. We're going to look at how the female body is uniquely, intricately designed for endurance, strength, and just massive athletic performance.
And what's fascinating here is that once we stop viewing a woman's dynamic hormonal shifts, her changing biomechanics, her different life stages as complications.
Or inherent barriers to performance.
Right, exactly. Once we stop seeing them as barriers, the entire narrative completely flips.
Yeah.
We start to realize they're actually the ultimate shortcut to optimizing performance.
A shortcut, yeah.
Yeah, because when an athlete aligns her training with these natural physiological rhythms, she unlocks just a whole new level of performance, resilience, and longevity. It really requires a complete reframing of what it means to train effectively.
And before we can even talk about how to train, what intervals to run or what weights to lift, we have to fundamentally understand the engine that drives all of this.
We really need to redefine the baseline.
Right. Because for a male athlete, the hormonal baseline is essentially a flat line from day to day. I mean, there might be slight diurnal variations in testosterone, but week to week, the engine stays the same.
It's very predictable.
But for a female athlete in her reproductive years, the baseline is this constantly moving target. We're talking about the menstrual cycle. And we need to completely abandon the cultural idea of the menstrual cycle as just having a period.
Okay.
Based on the clinical data we're looking at, we need to start looking at it as a highly sophisticated internal periodization clock. It is quite literally a built-in training schedule.
That is the perfect way to conceptualize it. The cycle, which averages around 28 days.
Though it can vary, right?
Oh, definitely. It's perfectly normal to range anywhere from 21 to 35 days.
Yeah.
But it's primarily driven by highly coordinated fluctuations in two major sex hormones, which are estrogen and progesterone.
Right, the big two.
Yeah. And the key takeaway here is that these hormones do not just exist to facilitate reproduction. They dictate systemic physiological functions.
So they're controlling the whole machine.
Exactly. They dictate substrate oxidation, which means they literally choose what kind of fuel your body burns at any given moment. They dictate thermoregulation, central nervous system fatigue, and even how quickly your muscles can recover from trauma.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of this, starting with the first half of the cycle, right? The follicular phase.
Yes, the follicular phase. This begins on day 1 of menses, so the start of bleeding, and lasts until ovulation, which is typically around day 14 in a 28-day cycle.
Right. And in those first few days during menstruation itself, both estrogen and progesterone are actually sitting at their absolute lowest levels.
Very low, yeah.
And the physiological profile in these first few days closely mirrors a male's hormonal profile in terms of metabolic function. Your core temperature is lower, your body easily taps into carbohydrates for fuel.
It's a really great time for recovery runs, light strength work, and mobility.
But then as you move past those initial bleeding days and deeper into the follicular phase, estrogen starts this steady climb, right? Eventually peaking just before ovulation.
It does.
And looking at the research, this rising estrogen isn't just a background detail, it is basically a physiological superpower.
It truly is. I mean, estrogen is a highly beneficial multi-system hormone, particularly for endurance athletes.
How so? At a cellular level?
Yeah. Well, let's look at what it does there. Estrogen actually acts to stabilize the lipid bilayer of muscle cell membranes.
Okay, stabilize the membranes. What does that mean for an athlete?
So when you go out for a hard run or lift heavy weights, you are intentionally creating micro tears in your muscle fibers. That mechanical stress is what triggers adaptation.
Right, breaking them down to build them back stronger.
Exactly. But estrogen's stabilizing effect significantly reduces this exercise-induced muscle damage, and it mitigates the severe inflammatory cascade that usually follows.
Wow, which perfectly explains a really wild statistic in the endurance data that I saw. Female ultra runners routinely finish 100-mile races, showing significantly lower levels of creatine kinase compared to their male counterparts.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And just for context, creatine kinase is a primary biomarker in the blood that indicates muscle damage. So we are talking about women literally running the exact same grueling 100-mile course.
Over the exact same mountains, yeah.
Over the same mountains. But finishing with less physiological destruction in their muscle tissue because their estrogen has been acting like a microscopic suit of armor around their cells.
Precisely. The mechanical trauma is the same, but the cellular resilience is vastly superior.
That is incredible.
And beyond protecting the muscle architecture, estrogen makes the body incredibly efficient at fat oxidation, while simultaneously conserving stored glycogen, which is your primary carbohydrate reserves in the liver and muscles.
So it's saving the fast fuel for when you really need it.
Right, because muscle protein synthesis and recovery rates peak during this specific high estrogen, low progesterone window. The late follicular phase is when the central nervous system and the muscular system are primed to absorb massive amounts of physical stress.
And adapt to it rapidly.
Exactly.
So practically speaking, if you are an athlete looking at your calendar, this late follicular phase, like those days right before ovulation, this is when you want to absolutely bury yourself in the gym or on the track.
Oh, absolutely. This is the window to schedule your high-intensity interval training, your VO2 max repeats.
Your heaviest deadlift.
Yes, and your attempts at personal bests. Your body is practically begging for hard, high-end work because it has the exact biochemical tools needed to repair the damage instantly.
But then, right in the middle of the cycle, ovulation happens. An egg is released, and the physiological landscape undergoes this massive seismic shift. We enter the luteal phase, covering roughly days 15 to 28.
Right, the second half of the cycle.
Talk to me about what happens to the engine here.
So, following ovulation, the follicle that released the egg transforms into the corpus luteum, which begins pumping out massive amounts of progesterone.
Such a dramatic spike.
A huge spike.
Yeah.
Estrogen is still present, having a secondary, smaller peak, but progesterone becomes the overwhelmingly dominant force. And unlike estrogen, progesterone is catabolic.
Catabolic meaning it breaks things down, right?
Exactly. It naturally promotes the breakdown of tissues, specifically muscle tissue, to harvest amino acids.
Oh, wow.
So to prevent the loss of lean mass during this 2-week window, the female body suddenly requires a much higher availability of dietary protein.
And it doesn't just break down tissue, right? It literally turns up the body's internal furnace.
It does. Progesterone raises the resting metabolic rate by about 5% to 10%.
So the data shows that this escalates total daily energy expenditure by roughly 7%. During the luteal phase, an athlete is burning significantly more calories and specifically more fat just sitting at their desk or sleeping.
Yes, but we have to look at the massive caveat that comes with that increased metabolic rate. It presents profound physiological challenges for an athlete trying to perform at a high level.
Because of the fuel access issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Progesterone suppresses a critical metabolic pathway called gluconeogenesis. It actively impairs the body's ability to mobilize those stored carbohydrates, the glycogen, and convert them into fast, usable energy.
So while you are indeed oxidizing fat much more efficiently at a resting or low intensity state, the moment you try to hit a steep mountain climb or sprint to the finish line,
your body biochemically struggles to access the fast burning fuel it needs.
Okay, let me offer an analogy to see if I'm tracking the mechanics of this correctly, because it sounds exactly like driving a modern hybrid car.
Oh, I like that. Let's hear it.
So in the follicular phase, when estrogen is high, you're running on the high octane racing fuel, the carbohydrates. The engine runs hot, it accelerates instantly, and you can really push it to the red line.
Yes, very responsive.
But in the luteal phase, it's like the car's internal computer just overrides your controls and forces you to switch to the slow-burning electric battery, which represents the fat stores.
Right.
And the electric battery is phenomenal for going like 500 miles at a slow, steady cruising speed. But if you are on the highway and you suddenly floor the gas pedal to pass a semi-truck, the electric engine just sort of groans and sluggishly responds. It simply cannot give you that explosive burst.
That is a highly accurate analogy. And it explains exactly why high-intensity running feels disproportionately and sometimes inexplicably difficult during the luteal phase.
You just feel so sluggish.
You do. You might feel like you are failing a workout, but your body is just biochemically resisting that high-end effort. And the challenges of the luteal phase don't stop at fuel utilization.
There's more.
Oh, yes. Progesterone physically elevates your baseline resting heart rate, often by 5 to 10 beats per minute. It slightly reduces your overall aerobic capacity. Furthermore, it impairs thermoregulatory heat dissipation.
Meaning your core temperature goes up, but your body gets worse at cooling itself down.
Exactly. The threshold at which you begin to sweat is delayed, meaning you get hotter, faster, and hold on to that heat longer.
That sounds miserable for a summer race.
It's very tough. And on top of that, progesterone causes blood plasma volume to drop as fluid shifts out of the blood vessels and into the interstitial spaces between your cells.
Wait, is that why we get so bloated?
Yes. This fluid shift is the physiological mechanism behind that profound feeling of bloating, heaviness, and lethargy that so many women experience before their period.
Wait, hold on. If the body is actively breaking down muscle tissue because progesterone is catabolic and it's biologically restricting access to fast energy and you're overheating faster,
Right.
and your blood volume is dropping so you feel like you're running in a lead suit, does that mean female athletes are just losing fitness for 2 weeks out of every single month? Should you just stay home and not train during the luteal phase?
Not at all. And this is where the traditional sports science model really failed women by telling them to just push through the exact same workouts all month long.
Just ignore it, basically.
Right. But it doesn't mean you stop training. It means you change how you train to work synergistically with the physiology rather than fighting a losing battle against it.
So adapting your workout intensity is the key.
Exactly. Since your body's now chemically primed for fat oxidation and struggles with high-intensity carb burning, the luteal phase is the absolute perfect time to shift your training blocks.
Towards what?
Toward long, slow distance, or LSD runs, steady-state endurance efforts, and active recovery. You lean into that slow-burning electric battery to build a massive aerobic base.
And what about the muscle breakdown? If I go out for a 3-hour zone 2 run in my luteal phase, how do I stop my body from cannibalizing my own muscle tissue to fuel it?
Through highly targeted nutrition. During the luteal phase, you must aggressively bump up your protein intake.
How much are we talking?
The clinical recommendation is to target between 1.4 to 2.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, distributed evenly throughout the day.
That's quite a bit.
It is.
Yeah.
But by flooding the bloodstream with circulating amino acids from your diet, you give the progesterone something else to metabolize. You provide the building blocks so the body doesn't have to break down your existing skeletal muscle for fuel.
It's incredible how simply understanding this mechanism completely changes your psychological perception of a bad workout.
It really reframes everything.
Because if you don't know this, and you try to do a track workout of blistering 400-meter sprints on day 24 of your cycle, you are going to feel slow, heavy, and emotionally discouraged.
You feel terrible.
You might think you're overtrained or losing your edge, but when you understand your periodization clock, you realize you aren't losing fitness at all. You just brought the wrong physiological tools to that specific workout.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of endurance sports, recognizing these specific metabolic advantages is a game changer.
In what way?
Well, the very things that make sprinting hard in the luteal phase are what make women exceptional ultra-endurance athletes. Women naturally oxidize fat significantly more efficiently than men during long endurance efforts.
Oh, because of the physiological baseline.
Exactly. This is a compounding effect. It is due to generally higher essential body fat percentages, estrogen's constant underlying influence on fat utilization, and the physiological fact that women possess a higher proportion of fatigue-resistant type I or slow-twitch muscle fibers.
So they are literally built for the long haul.
Yes. In a 100-mile or 200-mile race, that ability to steadily burn fat for 24 or 48 hours without depleting glycogen and hitting the wall is a massive inherent competitive advantage.
Which brings us to a really critical pivot point in this conversation. We've mapped out this incredible dynamic engine and how its fuel preferences shift.
Right.
But since the luteal phase demands more total energy and the metabolism is constantly changing gears, We have to talk about how athletes are actually fueling this machine day to day. Because if you get the fueling wrong, the consequences aren't just a slow race time.
No, they are systemically catastrophic.
Exactly. Let's explore the fueling paradox and the incredibly dangerous trap of clean eating.
This is undoubtedly one of the most vital clinical topics for female athletes right now. We're talking about READY-S, which stands for Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport. Yes. The context here is that endurance training, especially ultramarathon training, imposes extreme metabolic demands. Your body needs energy to run, sure, but it also needs a massive amount of energy just to keep your heart beating, your lungs expanding, and your immune system functioning.
Just to stay alive.
Right. When your dietary energy intake, so the total calories you consume, is insufficient to cover both the high cost of your training and your basic physiological baseline, you enter a state of low energy availability.
And if that keeps happening,
If that deficit becomes a chronic, ongoing state, it develops into the clinical syndrome of RDDAS.
and the prevalence numbers we are looking at in the sources are just staggering. Estimates suggest that up to 60% to 80% of female endurance athletes might face RADS at some point in their training history.
It's an epidemic.
It is. And the truly terrifying part is that it is very rarely intentional starvation. It frequently happens entirely accidentally, often when highly motivated athletes fall headfirst into the clean eating trap.
Yeah, the intersection of diet culture and endurance sports culture is highly problematic. Endurance sports often culturally praise extreme discipline, low body weight, and leanness as the ultimate metrics of dedication.
So people start cutting corners on their food.
Exactly. Athletes might start doing their morning runs in a fasted state to burn more fat. They might aggressively avoid carbohydrates because carbs have been demonized in popular mainstream diet culture.
Or they skip meals and snacks on their rest days.
Yes, because they psychologically feel they haven't earned the calories if they didn't run. But an athlete's body doesn't stop working on a rest day. It is rebuilding tissue, repairing bone, and synthesizing hormones 204/7.
So when you restrict these macronutrients, especially carbohydrates, you aren't just optimizing your race weight, you are slowly starving the engine.
That's exactly what's happening.
Let's walk through exactly what happens when the body realizes it isn't getting enough fuel to keep the lights on. Because it doesn't just quietly lose a few pounds and keep performing. It initiates a highly dramatic crisis management protocol.
Very dramatic.
Walk us through that biological shutdown.
Okay, so when energy intake consistently falls short, the brain, specifically the hypothalamus, which acts as the body's master control center, it takes over. The hypothalamus constantly monitors your energy balance.
Like a thermostat.
Right. And when it senses a chronic deficit, it makes a brutal evolutionary calculation. Survival is the only priority. Running a marathon is not a priority.
And reproduction.
Reproduction is a massive energy expenditure that the body can no longer afford. So the hypothalamus takes action. It aggressively downregulates the secretion of gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH.
Which does what exactly?
This cascade eventually shuts down the entire menstrual cycle. The period just stops. Clinically, this is called functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, or FHA.
And you know, in some twisted corners of running culture, losing your period used to be seen as a badge of honor, like a sign that you were finally training hard enough and lean enough.
Which is horrifying.
Right. But what you are saying is that it is actually a blaring neon red warning light that the engine is failing.
It is an emergency clinical warning sign. And the consequences are severe because when the cycle stops, estrogen production plummets to near zero.
And we just spent the first part of this deep dive discussing how protective estrogen is for the bones, muscles, and cellular membranes.
Exactly. Without that circulating estrogen, you see an immediate and accelerated loss of bone mineral density. The bones become brittle, skyrocketing the athlete's risk for catastrophic stress fractures in the tibia, femur, and pelvis.
Just snapping under the load.
Yes. And beyond the bones, RADS leads to impaired thyroid function, a compromised immune system where the athlete is constantly sick, severe gastrointestinal distress,
And the mental health impacts too, right?
profound psychological disturbances, clinical anxiety, depression, and irritability. Chronic underfueling, literally, structurally, breaks the body down.
So how do we outsmart this? If an athlete is putting in the high mileage, what are the specific actionable meal planning strategies required to stay out of the REDS danger zone?
It really requires a shift from passive eating to an aggressive, proactive fueling strategy. First and foremost, pre-run fueling is absolutely non-negotiable.
No more fasted runs.
No. Exercising in a fasted state forces the body to release high levels of cortisol and epinephrine, which are stress hormones. You are compounding the physiological stress of the run with the physiological stress of starvation. You must eat before you train.
Okay, and what about total carbs?
For daily carbohydrate intake, the absolute baseline for a female athlete should be 3 to 5 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. But during heavy volume training blocks, say peak marathon prep, that intake needs to surge massively, up to 8 to 12 grams per kilogram.
That is a mountain of pasta and rice. But what about during the actual long runs? If you're out on the trail for 6 hours, how are you fueling the engine while it's running?
Female athletes should target between 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour of exercise.
Okay, 30 to 60.
Yes, and it is important to note that pushing far beyond 60 grams per hour can often cause severe GI distress, nausea, cramping, diarrhea, because physiologically, women's intestines typically oxidize and absorb slightly fewer exogenous carbohydrates per hour than men during exercise.
You have to train your gut to handle the fuel.
You do. Additionally, for ultra-endurance efforts lasting over 4 hours, adding just a small amount of protein, around 5 grams per hour, along with the carbs, is highly effective at halting the muscle protein breakdown we discussed earlier.
Okay, so we are proactively eating our carbs, we are fueling our long runs, we are avoiding the clean eating trap. But there is another major nutritional piece to this puzzle.
Iron.
Yes, it is arguably the most frustrating chronic issue for female runners. Iron deficiency is just rampant in the running community, and the research highlights that female athletes face what is essentially a triple threat of iron depletion.
They do. And to understand why this matters, we must understand iron's role. Iron is not just a general health supplement. It is the core molecular component of hemoglobin.
The protein in your red blood cells.
Exactly. It binds to oxygen in the lungs and transports it to your working muscles. If your iron stores, your ferritin, are low, your body literally cannot carry enough oxygen.
So your aerobic capacity, your VO2 max, is directly physically capped. You'll feel breathless at a pace that should be easy.
Yes, and the triple threat that female runners face starts with the most obvious factor, which is menstruation. That accounts for a baseline loss of 15 to 30 milligrams of iron per month.
Okay, so menstruation is threat number 1. But the second threat genuinely blew my mind when I was reading the notes on it. Foot strike hemolysis. Are you telling me that simply the mechanical act of my foot hitting the pavement is physically destroying my iron stores?
Yes, it is a fascinating and kind of brutal reality of the sport. Foot strike hemolysis is the mechanical destruction of red blood cells.
Just from the impact?
Just from the impact. Every time your foot strikes the ground, the repetitive high-impact force transmits through your shoe and actually crushes the red blood cells circulating through the tiny capillaries in the soles of your feet.
That is wild.
Over the course of a 20-mile long run, millions upon millions of red blood cells are mechanically ruptured and destroyed. Your body has to constantly scavenge whatever iron it can from those broken cells and scramble to build new ones.
That is incredible imagery. I am literally crushing my own blood cells with every step. So that's threat number 2. What is threat number 3?
Threat number 3 is exercise-induced inflammation, which leads us to a highly complex, deeply frustrating regulatory hormone called hepcidin.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. When I first tried to understand hepcidin, it felt like a massive biological paradox. Walk us through the mechanics of this.
Okay.
So, say I go out and run a really hard, hilly 15 miles. That effort creates micro tears and inflammation in my muscle tissue, right?
Yes, definitely.
That local inflammation triggers the release of a chemical messenger called interleukin-6 or IL-6. This IL-6 travels through my bloodstream straight to my liver. And the liver responds by releasing hepcidin. What exactly is this hepcidin doing?
Well, hepcidin acts as the master regulator, or the gatekeeper, of iron metabolism in the human body. Evolutionarily, hepcidin's job is to protect you from bacterial infections.
Because bacteria feed on iron?
Exactly. Bacteria need iron to survive and multiply. So when the body senses high inflammation, whether from an infection or from running 15 miles, hepcidin is released into the bloodstream. It travels down to your gut and effectively locks the biological doors on iron absorption.
It just shuts it down completely.
It actively blocks your intestinal cells from absorbing any iron from the food you were eating or the supplements you were swallowing.
Wait, hold on, let me get this straight. I run a hard 15 miles, which crushes my red blood cells via foot strike hemolysis and depletes my iron.
Right.
I decide to be a responsible, proactive athlete, so I go home and immediately cook a massive iron-rich steak and a giant spinach salad to replenish my stores.
Sounds logical.
But because I just ran, my inflammation is high, my interleukin-6 is surging, and my liver is pumping out hepcidin, which has locked my gut. Does that mean the traditional advice of eating a giant steak dinner to celebrate finishing a marathon is entirely useless from an iron absorption perspective?
Biologically speaking, yes.
That is crazy.
I know. The protein and the calories in that post-run meal are great for muscle repair, obviously. But the dietary iron from that steak will largely pass right through your digestive tract, unabsorbed. The hepcidin gate is closed.
Wow. How long does the gate stay closed?
Research shows that this post-exercise hepcidin spike typically peaks roughly 3 to 6 hours after you finish your workout, and it can stay elevated for up to 24 hours depending on the intensity of the effort.
That goes against everything runners are taught. It feels like a cruel joke of biology. So how do we outsmart our own liver? What is the specific actionable nutrient timing strategy here?
Nutrient timing becomes absolutely critical. To maximize iron absorption, you must take your oral iron supplements or eat your highly concentrated iron meals when your baseline hepcidin levels are at their absolute lowest.
Which is when?
Generally, because of circadian rhythms, hepcidin is lowest first thing in the morning. If you are going for a morning run, the protocol is strict. You would consume your iron supplement either right before you start running or within a very tight 30-minute window immediately after finishing.
So you have to beat the inflammation.
Exactly. You have to get the iron into the gut before that post-exercise interleukin-6 inflammatory cascade has a chance to reach the liver and trigger the hepcidin spike.
So it's literally a race against your own inflammatory system. You have 30 minutes to get the iron through the door before the deadbolt slides into place.
Exactly. And the clinical nuances go even deeper. Recent sports nutrition guidelines suggest that taking a high-dose iron supplement every other day, rather than daily, actually improves total overall absorption.
Oh, why is that?
Because taking it daily can cause a chronic low-level elevation of hepcidin, whereas alternate day dosing allows the hepcidin levels to clear out, opening the gut more fully for the next dose.
That makes a lot of sense.
Additionally, maintaining adequate vitamin D levels is critical here, as vitamin D acts as a master switch that helps regulate this entire inflammatory response, keeping baseline hepcidin lower.
Okay, this is a massive paradigm shift. We've covered the hormonal engine, we've learned how to fuel it with carbs and avoid REDS, and we've figured out the exact biochemical timing required to keep the iron flowing properly.
Right.
But now we need to step back and look at the chassis, the physical framework holding this entire system together. Let's transition into biomechanics. Because maintaining the blood and muscles is useless if the skeleton falls apart.
Very true.
And female athletes have a unique structural foundation that requires highly specific maintenance.
They do. And the biomechanical differences between men and women are profound. If these differences are ignored in training, they lead directly and predictably to injury.
So what's the most significant structural difference we need to analyze?
It's the Q angle, which stands for the quadriceps angle. Genetically, women typically have a wider pelvis to accommodate the biological possibility of childbirth. Because the hips are wider, the angle from the hip joint down to the knee joint is sharper or more oblique than it is in a male skeleton.
And basic physics dictates that a sharper angle creates entirely different force distributions when you apply gravity and impact.
Precisely. This wider Q angle creates a natural mechanical tendency for the femur, the thigh bone, to angle inward. Let's look at the running gait cycle for a second.
Okay.
During the stance phase of running, there's a moment where your entire body weight plus the gravitational force of the impact is loaded entirely onto one single leg.
All that force on one side.
Right. If the muscles stabilizing the hip are not exceptionally strong, that wider Q angle forces the hip into excessive adduction and internal rotation. Essentially, the hip drops and the knee collapses inward toward the midline of the body.
And that collapse is bad news.
It is the primary root cause of nearly all lower body running injuries in women. Runner's knee, which is patellofemoral pain syndrome, IT band friction syndrome, and medial tibial stress syndrome, or shin splints.
And we are not just talking about minor aches and pains that require an ice pack. The clinical statistics show that women are 4 to 6 times more likely to suffer catastrophic non-contact ACL tears than men.
It's a terrifying reality.
It really is.
Yeah.
And just to clarify for everyone, a non-contact ACL tear means nobody tackled them. Their own biomechanics simply failed under the load and the ligament snapped.
Yes, and it is largely driven by this specific neuromuscular and structural vulnerability. The knee is caught in the middle of a collapsing system. But a knee isn't the only thing taking the brunt of the force. We have to move up the kinetic chain and talk deeply about the pelvic floor.
Oh yes, the pelvic floor.
When you're running, The impact forces transmit up to 2.5 times your body weight through each leg, straight up the femur and directly into the pelvis.
And the pelvic floor is so often treated as this taboo topic, something whispered about or dismissed as an issue only relevant to older women who have had 5 kids.
Which is completely false.
The data makes it incredibly clear. The pelvic floor is a critical, highly active pressure management system for all female runners, regardless of age or childbirth history. It acts like a hammock or a trampoline at the base of the pelvis.
Right, coordinating continuously with the diaphragm, the abdominal wall, and the muscles of the lower spine to absorb shock. Every time you breathe in, the diaphragm drops down, and the pelvic floor must stretch and yield downward to accept the pressure.
And then when you exhale,
or when your foot hits the ground, has to rebound upward to stabilize the core. When that system is weak or uncoordinated, the impact of running overwhelms the trampoline.
And that's when you see the clinical symptoms, like stress, urinary incontinence, leaking while running, deep pelvic pain, or a profound sensation of heaviness in the lower abdomen.
Yes, but here's a vital paradigm-shifting distinction made in modern pelvic physical therapy literature. Many female athletes facing these issues do not have a weak pelvic floor.
Wait, they don't?
No, they have a hypertonic pelvic floor.
Hypertonic meaning overactive, locked up, and too tight, which means that the absolute most common piece of advice given to women, just do your Kegels, is actually the worst possible thing you can do.
It's the exact opposite of what they need.
Let's debate this because it sounds counterintuitive to a lot of people. If I'm leaking when I run, doesn't that mean I need to tighten things up?
It is entirely counterintuitive, which is why it is so widely misunderstood. Think of the pelvic floor like your bicep muscle. If you walk around all day with your elbow bent and your bicep clenched as hard as possible, that muscle is going to become exhausted, tight, and painful.
It's in spasm.
Yes, it is in a state of spasm. A Kegel is an active contraction. It is a bicep curl for the pelvis. If your pelvic floor is already locked tight in a state of hypertonic spasm because it is desperately trying to stabilize your weak hips,
doing hundreds of Kegels is just asking a spasming muscle to spasm harder.
Exactly. It will only exacerbate the dysfunction, lead to severe pelvic pain, and worsen the leaking because the muscle has no room left to stretch and absorb the shock of running.
So if Kegels are off the table for a hypertonic floor, what is the solution?
For a hypertonic pelvic floor, the immediate intervention is targeted relaxation. The athlete must practice deep 360-degree diaphragmatic breathing. You have to consciously teach the nervous system how to let that muscle yield, drop, and relax.
Recoordinating the whole system.
Right. You improve the lumbopelvic coordination to teach the entire core system how to dynamically absorb shock, rather than just clenching rigidly against the impact.
So we have this complex system, a wider Q angle threatening to collapse the knees inward, and a pelvic floor that is working overtime to manage massive impact pressures. How do we build a structural foundation to armor this system?
Heavy, targeted strength training is absolutely mandatory.
Mandatory.
I cannot state this strongly enough. You cannot just run to get better at running. Running is simply the expression of your fitness. You must lift weights to build the scaffolding that supports the running.
And what muscles are we targeting?
To address the Q angle vulnerability and physically prevent that inward knee collapse, you have to build massive strength in the lateral stabilizers. The gluteus medius, the adductors, the inner thigh muscles, and the deep core musculature.
Let's get highly practical here. The literature provides some very specific, actionable drills designed exactly for this female biomechanical profile. Let's walk the listener through the mechanics of them. First up, the gold standard, Bulgarian split squats.
The Bulgarian split squat is a phenomenal unilateral or single leg exercise. You place your back foot elevated on a bench behind you, and you lower into a squat with your front leg.
But the torso angle matters, right?
Yes, for female runners, the specific angle of the torso is critical. Performing this with a slight 45-degree forward hinge at the hips is key.
Why the hinge?
Because leaning forward shifts the mechanical load away from the quadriceps and maximizes the recruitment of the gluteus maximus and gluteus medius. As you lower down, you have to fight intensely to keep the front knee tracking straight over the middle toes, actively preventing it from caving inward.
It builds profound single leg stability that directly translates to the running stride.
Exactly.
Next is an exercise called the Copenhagen plank. I have tried to incorporate these into my routine, and frankly, they are brutal.
They are humbling, but they are necessary. You set up on the floor as if you were doing a standard side plank. But instead of your feet resting on the ground, your top leg is resting on top of a weight bench or a sturdy chair.
Okay.
You lift your hips up, and then you bring your bottom leg up to meet the bottom of the bench. You are suspending your entire body weight using the adductors, the inner thigh muscles of that top leg. The adductors directly connect to the pubic bone and are a massive part of stabilizing the pelvic floor.
Then we have side plank stars. You hold a standard side plank and you actively lift at the top straight leg up toward the ceiling, holding it like a star.
Yes. This specifically targets the gluteus medius to prevent what we call pelvic drop, where one side of your hip sags down every time you take a step while running.
And finally, the big foundational lifts. Heavy goblet squats and heavy Romanian deadlifts, or RDLs, targeting the hamstrings and posterior chain. But here's where I want to pause and push back on behalf of the listener.
Okay, go ahead.
I know exactly what a lot of endurance athletes are thinking right now. I am a runner. I want to feel light, fast, and aerodynamic. Why on earth am I going into the gym to do heavy Romanian deadlifts? Isn't lifting heavy weights going to bulk me up, put on extra muscle mass, and ultimately slow me down?
It is the single most pervasive, stubborn myth in female fitness, and it needs to be dismantled completely. You will not bulk up from doing heavy 5-rep deadlifts 2 or 3 times a week.
Because we don't have the hormones for it.
Right. Women generally lack the high circulating volumes of testosterone required for massive muscle growth. But far more importantly, building sheer muscle size hypertrophy requires a massive sustained caloric surplus. You have to eat thousands of extra calories specifically to build that tissue.
Which an endurance runner is definitely not doing.
Right. An endurance runner in heavy training is rarely in a massive caloric surplus. In fact, as we discussed with RDS, they are often fighting a deficit.
So what is the heavyweight actually doing inside the body if it isn't inflating the muscles and making them huge?
Lifting heavy, specifically working in the range of 70% to 85% of your 1 repetition maximum, where you can only complete 5 or 6 reps before failing, it forces a profound neuromuscular adaptation.
It's a nervous system thing.
Exactly. It trains your central nervous system. When you lift something incredibly heavy, the brain has to quickly recruit high threshold motor units and fire them all simultaneously to move the weight.
So you aren't building biologically larger muscles.
No, you are building a faster, more efficient, more powerful neurological connection from the brain to the muscle fibers you already have. This heavy mechanical load is what builds the essential neuromuscular control required to catch your knee before it collapses inward on a trail descent.
And it helps the bones too, right?
Yes. The intense bending force that heavy lifting places on the long bones of the legs is the exact mechanical stress required to stimulate osteoblasts and lay down new bone mineral density, protecting you from stress fractures.
That makes perfect sense. We aren't making the engine bigger. We are upgrading the software that controls the engine and structurally reinforcing the chassis.
Great way to put it.
Now, this biomechanical chassis we've just spent all this time optimizing, it doesn't stay static. A woman's biomechanics, her hormonal profile, and her lifestyle go through massive seismic shifts over the course of her life, which brings us to a huge evolutionary disruption: pregnancy and motherhood.
A massive disruption.
Let's talk about the lifespan athlete and training through the profound transitions of caregiving.
Well, the transition into pregnancy and the subsequent postpartum period demand the most significant rapid cardiovascular and structural adaptations a human body can undergo.
It's literally building a human.
Right. Almost immediately during pregnancy, the body begins producing high levels of a hormone appropriately called relaxin. As the name suggests, relaxin's primary biological function is to increase joint laxity.
To make everything looser.
Yes. It loosens the ligaments, specifically to allow the rigid bones of the pelvis to expand and separate in preparation for childbirth. But systemically, this means every joint in the body, the knees, the ankles, the spine, is suddenly looser, hypermobile, and significantly less stable during dynamic exercise.
So given that the joints are essentially loosening their bolts, how should a pregnant endurance athlete approach her training? Is it safe to keep running?
Yes, under proper medical guidance, maintaining an active training routine is highly beneficial for both maternal health and fetal development.
And what about strength training?
The clinical guidelines note that high-load resistance training in the first trimester is not only safe, but actively building that strength early on can significantly reduce the severity of pelvic floor symptoms and lower back pain later in the pregnancy.
But there are things to avoid later on.
Definitely. As the pregnancy progresses into the second and third trimesters, the abdominal wall profoundly elongates. The linea alba, the connective tissue running down the center of the stomach, stretches.
So no planks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because of this, exercises that create massive intra-abdominal pressure, like holding heavy planks or performing heavy front-loaded barbell squats, must be avoided, as they can exacerbate diastasis recti, which is the severe separation of the abdominal muscles.
Adapting during pregnancy is one thing, but the literature suggests that the real danger zone, the place where athletes truly wreck their biomechanics, begins after the baby is born, the postpartum return to run plan.
Oh, this is such a critical period.
Because if you open up social media, it is absolutely saturated with these toxic bounce back in 4 weeks narratives, showing influencers running half marathons a month after giving birth. The medical sources we are looking at strongly, urgently caution against this.
It is a highly dangerous cultural narrative. Rushing the return to high-impact running before the tissues have healed is a primary direct cause of severe long-term complications.
Like what?
Like pelvic organ prolapse, where the bladder or uterus actually drops into the vaginal canal, and chronic musculoskeletal imbalances. Connective tissue, ligaments, and the pelvic floor muscles simply require biological time to heal from the profound trauma of childbirth.
What's the recommended timeline?
The modern evidence-based physical therapy guidelines are definitive. A woman must wait an absolute minimum of 12 weeks postpartum before initiating any high-impact activities like running or jumping.
12 weeks can feel like an absolute eternity, an unbearable loss of identity for a highly dedicated runner. Let's break down exactly what those 12 weeks of active, structured recovery actually look like. Because it isn't just sitting on the couch wrapped in a blanket for 3 months. It is a highly active, intentional rebuilding process.
It is a highly structured, progressive loading protocol. Let's walk through the timeline. In weeks 0 to 2 postpartum, the focus is entirely neurological.
Reconnecting the brain to the muscles.
Yes. The intra-abdominal pressure system has been completely stretched, cut, or compromised. The brain literally has to remap its connection to the pelvic floor muscles. The only exercises during this phase are deep diaphragmatic breathing and gentle, unweighted pelvic floor coordination. You were just trying to get the brain to successfully talk to those muscles again.
If you skip this step and go straight to running,
you are essentially trying to fire a cannon from a canoe. There is no stable base to absorb the recoil.
That makes sense. And then as we move into weeks 2 to 4,
in weeks 2 to 4, you begin light muscular activation. You introduce basic glute bridges, unweighted bodyweight squats, and progressive gradual walking. You're testing to see how the system handles moving basic body weight against gravity without leaking or pain.
Moving into weeks 4 to 6, the cardiovascular engine can start waking up.
Right. Athletes can introduce low-impact stationary cycling or swimming.
And then weeks 8 to 12 is a testing phase.
It is a critical testing phase. This is when you start structured impact preparation. You aren't running yet, but you are testing the system's ability to handle rapid force. You introduce double leg hopping, leg jump rope, and skipping. You are specifically monitoring how the pelvic floor handles these light ballistic gravity loads.
And finally, at week 12 and beyond.
Assuming the athlete has 0 symptoms of heaviness or leaking, and ideally after receiving a physical clearance from a specialized pelvic physical therapist, they can initiate a gradual couch to 5K progression.
You do not go back to your pre-pregnancy marathon plan.
Never. You start with 1 minute of running and 2 minutes of walking, patiently rebuilding volume. It's a patient, deeply necessary rebuilding of the entire mechanical foundation.
And the reality is, once that physical foundation is finally ready to run again, the athlete immediately slams into an entirely new set of psychological and logistical challenges. Balancing the intense demands of endurance training with the sheer sleep-deprived chaos of motherhood and caregiving.
It's a completely different landscape.
This intersection of high performance and caregiving is where we see some of the absolute most inspiring feats of human endurance I have ever read about.
Oh, for sure.
The sources highlight the incredible story of Stephanie Case. In 2025, she competed in the 100-kilometer Ultra Trail Snowdonia by UTMB, which is a brutally steep, rugged mountain race. She won the entire women's field. But here's the detail that makes it legendary. She stopped 3 separate times on the side of the trail during the race to breastfeed her 6-month-old daughter.
It is a profound, awe-inspiring demonstration of human capability. But we must understand that to achieve that level of performance while actively caregiving requires more than just physical fitness. It requires a radical psychological shift.
You have to change how you think about your time.
Right. It requires completely abandoning what the clinical literature refers to as last priority syndrome.
Yes, last priority syndrome. This is such a pervasive issue. It is the societal conditioning where women naturally put their paid work, their children's needs, their partner's schedule, and the cleanliness of their household first. And they relegate their athletic training to whatever tiny scrap of energy and time is left over at 9:00 p.m. when the house is finally quiet.
Exactly. To succeed at a high level, training must be entirely reframed. It cannot be viewed as a selfish hobby. It must be viewed as essential, non-negotiable self-care and mental health maintenance.
Which requires a lot of logistical maneuvering.
It requires highly practical strategies. One primary strategy is integrating microsessions. If the reality of your day is that you cannot get a pristine, uninterrupted hour at the gym, you adapt. You execute a 15-minute microsession of heavy, intense Bulgarian split squats in your living room while the baby naps or during your lunch break at work.
It also requires fundamentally redefining partner support. It requires true collaboration, not a partner just helping out or babysitting their own kids, but actively trading equivalent responsibilities.
Yes, it means explicitly negotiating the schedule, trading Tuesday night bath time duties for Tuesday night track time, ensuring the female athlete's goals are given equal logistical weight in the household.
And it also inevitably means temporarily lowering household standards. Let the house be messy.
Yes, absolutely. Because there is a serious physiological issue with recovery that we must address. This raises an important question. How do athletes in this life stage actually view rest?
Because sitting down isn't always resting.
When caregiving demands are extreme, true rest is a logistical impossibility. Sitting on the couch trying to watch TV is not physiological rest if a toddler is constantly jumping on your chest or screaming.
You're just exchanging physical stress for high alert central nervous system stress.
Exactly. Proper recovery is when the body enters a parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system state. That is the only time tissue heals. For a caregiving athlete, achieving that state might require investing financial resources in temporary childcare just so you can take a nap.
Or asking for help.
It means asking extended family for help, or simply looking at a sink full of dirty dishes and accepting that sleep is biologically more important than a clean kitchen. Without prioritizing true parasympathetic rest, catastrophic injury is not just a risk, it is an inevitability.
So the athlete navigates the exhausting early caregiving years, successfully rebuilds the pelvic floor, and gets back to high performance. But the lifespan of an athlete is a moving timeline. The hormonal engine doesn't stay stable. Eventually, women hit another massive, unavoidable physiological shift. Yes, this brings us to a stage of life that has historically been completely ignored by sports science, the menopausal transition. From the late 30s through the 60s, the hormonal rules of the game completely change once again.
They really do. This transition, encompassing perimenopause and menopause, is clinically defined by the erratic fluctuation and eventual permanent drop in circulating estrogen.
Which is a huge deal given what we learned earlier.
Yes. Throughout this deep dive, we have repeatedly established that estrogen provides a profound anabolic stimulus. It signals the body to build muscle, it stabilizes cellular membranes, and it commands the bones to absorb minerals and stay dense.
So when that signal fades...
When that hormonal signal diminishes and eventually vanishes, the female body is left highly vulnerable. Without intervention, this leads directly to sarcopenia, which is rapid age-related muscle loss and severe, dangerous drops in bone mineral density, leading to osteopenia and osteoporosis.
This means the training paradigm has to completely shift. The approach that worked perfectly in our 20s, maybe going out for lots of long, slow-distance runs, lifting some light 10-pound dumbbells for 15 reps, taking a flowing yoga class, that approach is simply not going to cut it anymore, is it?
No, it will fail completely. The heavy lifting imperative becomes absolutely non-negotiable. Strength training shifts from being highly beneficial for performance in your 20s to being absolutely critical for structural survival after 50.
Light weights just don't do enough.
Lifting light weights for high repetitions simply does not provide the necessary mechanical stress to force the body to adapt.
Because you no longer have the estrogen to tell the body to build bone, you have to bypass the hormonal system entirely and send a different signal.
Precisely. You must use raw mechanical loading to stimulate the central nervous system. Postmenopausal athletes must lift incredibly heavy.
Like to failure.
Yes. This means selecting a weight where you reach absolute muscular failure by the 5th or 6th repetition of a squat, deadlift, or heavy press. That intense, crushing mechanical load sends a blaring, unavoidable signal through the central nervous system that physically forces the body to preserve its existing muscle mass and commands the osteoblasts to lay down new bone mineral density.
It is a mechanical override of the hormonal deficit.
That's exactly what it is.
Alongside the absolute necessity of heavy lifting, the exercise physiology data strongly emphasizes song sprint interval training and HIIT. We are talking about 10 to 30 second all-out maximum lung-burning sprint efforts. Why is this specific type of extreme intensity so crucial during the menopausal transition?
Well, menopause is heavily associated with an insidious increase in insulin resistance. The body becomes less efficient at clearing glucose from the bloodstream, leading to weight gain and a profound loss of the metabolic flexibility of that fat-burning efficiency we discussed earlier.
So the sprints fix that.
Short, explosive, all-out sprint efforts are the biological antidote. This extreme intensity is highly effective at forcing the muscle fibers to raggedly pull in and consume circulating glucose, entirely independent of insulin. It preserves cardiovascular health, restores insulin sensitivity, and actively maintains that crucial fat-burning engine.
But wait, let's look at the recovery math here. If I am in my 50s, my estrogen is low, so my muscles take significantly longer to repair themselves. Yet, you were telling me I need to be in the gym lifting incredibly heavy weights to failure and then going to the track to do all-out maximum effort sprints.
It sounds like a lot, I know.
How do we balance these extreme intense sessions without completely burning out the central nervous system or tearing a hamstring?
It requires a strict, uncompromising shift in training philosophy.
Yeah.
Quality over quantity. The clinical guidelines are crystal clear that 2 highly focused, incredibly heavy, entirely well-rested training sessions a week are vastly superior to 4 mediocre, fatiguing, half-hearted sessions.
So you work way harder, but way less often.
You have to rest more days than you work. Your recovery windows must expand, and your nutrition must fiercely support this structural maintenance.
Back to the protein.
Daily protein intake must remain very high, but timing becomes critical. Athletes must target 35 to 40 grams of high-quality protein immediately at breakfast, first thing in the morning, to forcefully halt the overnight catabolic breakdown and offset that sarcopenic muscle loss.
It's a completely different mindset. It's about providing the body with a loud, unmistakable mechanical stimulus and then aggressively backing off and giving it the protein and the sleep it needs to rebuild.
Exactly.
We've built an incredible physiological armor today. We've tracked the hormonal engine. We've learned to fuel the iron through the hepcidin window. We've armored the Q angle with heavy split squats. We've navigated the postpartum rebuild. And we've learned to lift heavy to survive menopause. But participating in ultra endurance running isn't just a physical test.
Not at all.
In fact, if you talk to anyone who runs 100 miles, they will tell you it is primarily a psychological test. Let's move to our final area of exploration, the mind and the ultra endurance community.
All the physical preparations we've discussed, the biomechanics, the fueling, the heavy lifting, they only get you to the starting line.
Right.
Once you are 50 miles into a 100-mile mountain race, running through the middle of the night, the physiological and the psychological become inextricably intertwined.
And the research indicates women have a unique advantage here.
Yes, psychological research indicates that female athletes bring a highly unique, deeply effective mental toolkit to these extreme endurance events.
One of the psychological concepts from sources that really stood out and challenged my assumptions is the idea of emotional regulation and flow psyche. The data shows female athletes frequently score significantly higher in flow psyche ratings during these long, agonizing events.
Flow psyche is a measurable psychological state. It relates to the athlete's ability to remain intensely present in the moment, to successfully manage extreme emotional highs and crushing lows, and to stay hyper-focused on the immediate physical task.
Just taking the next step.
Right. Without being overwhelmed by existential anxiety or the external pressure of the total distance remaining. Furthermore, women tend to be far more conservative and realistic in their self-assessment prior to an event.
Which is fascinating because in the corporate world or in general society, being conservative in your self-assessment is usually framed as a negative trait. It's labeled as imposter syndrome or a lack of confidence.
Exactly. But in the extreme environment of an ultramarathon, slightly underestimating your own capacity translates directly into a smarter, highly conservative, incredibly disciplined initial pacing strategy.
Pacing is everything.
Men, statistically and historically, are far more likely to vastly overestimate their aerobic capacity, go out way too fast in the first 20 miles, driven by ego, and spectacularly crash, burn, and drop out later in the race. Women pace themselves far more evenly. When energy conservation is the ultimate goal of a 100-mile race, that lack of ego is a massive strategic advantage.
And then there's the community aspect of the sport. Women often thrive on social motivation. The sources describe this beautiful, somewhat contradictory concept of collaborative competitiveness.
It is a fascinating sociological dynamic unique to the female endurance community. Collaborative competitiveness is the proven ability to fiercely, relentlessly compete for a podium spot, to want to win while simultaneously supporting, encouraging, and uplifting the fellow racers you're trying to beat.
You want to win, but you want them to do well too.
Exactly. The community itself becomes a vital source of psychological strength. Women create supportive networks on the trail that actively enhance physical persistence.
But the mind also has to deal with incredibly brutal, practical, logistical realities on the trail. We're talking about navigating a 100-mile race, running continuously for 24 to 30 hours in the wilderness while actively menstruating. There are no restrooms. There is no privacy. It is muddy. It is raining. How do athletes manage this intense physical reality without losing their minds to anxiety?
Logistical navigation is a critical practice skill. The female running community has developed highly practical unspoken strategies. For instance, athletes utilizing menstrual cups will carry pre-sterilized backups in sealed Ziploc bags, systematically swapping them out at remote aid stations and dealing with the cleaning post-race.
And they have to watch their hydration even closer.
They understand the physiology, so they know they must hyper-prioritize hydration and electrolytes during this time because the massive fluid shifts during menstruation can cause sudden race-ending cramp spikes.
And thankfully, the gear industry has finally caught up to the biology. We are seeing specialized, breathable, technical apparel designed by women for women, like the Hama menstrual cycling and running shorts mentioned in the clinical sources.
Those are game changers.
These garments are engineered with an integrated 8-hour absorption battery life, rapidly wicking away sweat to prevent severe chafing, and frankly, completely removing the persistent psychological anxiety of leaking so the athlete can just focus on the relentless task of moving forward.
Removing that mental load is crucial for maintaining that flow state. But there is one final, deeply ingrained psychological hurdle that the sociological sources note women specifically have to consciously battle and overcome when they are out on the trail.
Oh, the caretaker impulse. So what does this all mean when the rubber meets the trail? It means women often have to actively fight what is called the caretaker impulse. Because women are so heavily, deeply conditioned by society from birth to care for others, to nurture, and to prioritize others' comfort, they will literally be in the middle of a race they have trained a year for, see a male runner sitting on a rock rubbing a cramped calf muscle, and feel an overwhelming, almost uncontrollable impulse to stop running, sacrifice their own race time, and take care of that person.
And while aiding someone in a true life-threatening medical emergency is obviously paramount in the mountains, stopping for every single runner who is experiencing a blister, a cramp, or a bad mood completely derails your own competitive goals.
You can't save everyone.
Female athletes must consciously practice giving themselves explicit permission to prioritize their own race. Establishing that firm psychological boundary, recognizing that not everyone experiencing discomfort requires your personal intervention and sacrifice, is a vital, difficult part of race day mental strategy.
You have to remind yourself, I am an athlete first today. Give yourself permission to run your own race, to pass the person on the rock, and to chase your own potential.
That's the mindset you need.
Okay, we have covered an absolutely immense amount of ground today. We started by looking at the menstrual cycle, completely tearing down the idea that it is a burden, and rebuilding it as a powerful periodization clock. We learned to push max intensities on the high-octane racing fuel of the follicular phase, and how to utilize the incredible fat-burning endurance capacity of the luteal phase.
We examined the severe dangers of RDS and the insidious nature of the clean eating trap. We learned the exact biochemical timing needed to outsmart hepcidin, ensuring we get our iron in either first thing in the morning or within that tight 30-minute window post-run.
We armored our biomechanics. We learned how to protect the Q angle with heavy Bulgarian split squats. We learned to respect the absolute necessity of the 12-week postpartum healing process, and we completely redefined what true rest looks like while navigating the chaos of caregiving and motherhood.
We embraced the undeniable necessity of extremely heavy lifting to muscular failure during the menopausal transition, using mechanical load to stimulate the central nervous system and protect our bone density when estrogen drops. And finally, we explored how the unique psychology of collaborative competitiveness, conservative pacing, and flow state gives women a distinct, powerful edge in ultra-endurance events.
It is a completely different, infinitely more accurate way of looking at the female athlete. We've successfully rebuilt the model. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought from our expert that completely flipped my perspective on everything we just spent the last hour discussing.
For decades, traditional sports science viewed the female menstrual cycle as a complication, a messy, inconvenient variable that ruined their clean, male-centric training data. But what if we completely flipped the script? Imagine an alternate reality where sports science had been built exclusively around female physiology from the very dawn of time.
The ultimate paradigm shift.
If that were the baseline, perhaps today we would view male athletes as incredibly rigid and biologically disadvantaged. We would look at men with their flat, unchanging hormonal profiles, and we would say it is a biological shame they lack this incredible, dynamic, built-in monthly cycle.
Wow.
They are missing an internal clock that naturally periodizes their training, forces necessary recovery windows, and dynamically optimizes their metabolic flexibility between carbohydrates and fat. The cycle is not a complication to be managed. It is an evolutionary masterclass in endurance physiology.
An evolutionary masterclass. Remember that X-ray machine we talked about at the very beginning? The one searching for a clean, static, binary picture. We don't need it. The female body isn't a static machine meant to be frozen in time, and it certainly isn't a smaller version of a man. It is a dynamic, constantly adapting, fiercely capable engine designed for immense endurance. Keep learning the rhythms of your own engine, keep proactively adjusting the fuel to match the phase, and keep diving deep into your own limitless potential. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
All right, guys, thanks for listening. You women are killing it out there on the course. You guys are really quick and just killing it out there in your ultra runnings. I think a woman won the 250 Cadona, and she crushed it. So whatever's going on there, you're crushing it, and keep continuing, crushing it out there and doing your best. I just wanted to update you a little bit more on the progress that I'm doing. If you wanted to know, just currently still doing the 150 grams of protein, which is like 1 pound per body weight for me because I'm 150. And I guess I went to a party last weekend, and they had some crab dip and some sausage balls. Ate that, and had a really bad run on Saturday. I'm definitely 100%, somehow allergic to crab and shrimp. So I don't think I'm allergic to like salmon or other types of fish. So kind of strange that way. But I had to stop a lot of times, maybe 12 times. To catch my breath because I could barely breathe out there. It was just 5 miles, but I had a continuing to stop. So, food's so dynamite for me. Definitely has an impact. Anyways, it was kind of strange because I still had my VO2 max at 48 when I got back, which I didn't think maybe it wouldn't be that because I was just doing so poorly, I guess, out there on Saturday. But anyways, I did drink the beet powder and then the clover, and that seemed not to have any effect on me on Saturday because it was a really, really bad run. But on a positive note, on Tuesday, today, I ended up not PRing, but there's a really good run. I put new shoes on, which maybe I should be walking around with them first because I started to get some pain in the middle of my foot, and I had to adjust my stride. to finish the 5 miles. But anyhow, I took the beet powder, the cinnamon powder, or just cinnamon, I guess, and then the clover. And when I say that, I take like 1/3 of a teaspoon in like a small, like 2-ounce shot glass. So not much, but I can definitely feel like my breathing better when I take this. So that's why I kind of continue it. But instead of taking it at night, I take it before I go on a run, which seems to help a little bit better, I think. So that's what I've been doing. And anyways, my VO2 max on my watch went up again. So now it's at 49, which is pretty awesome. But I didn't PR, so that I don't understand how it all works sometimes with the VO2 max in your watch. But it was pretty close to being a PR. But whatever the case is, it's just continuing to go up, and I'm not doing any kind of particular VO2 max workouts or anything like that. I'm still healing, so I haven't been doing any kind of sprints uphill or anything like that, or the staircase workout that I usually like to do for VO2 training. But what I have been doing as well, I kind of got into weighted vests. I started this probably about 2 weeks ago. They had a really good sale at Costco. And it was only like $25 for one of these weighted vests. Now, it's not that heavy. I mean, it's 12 pounds. But usually after I go eat lunch, I go for a walk for like 30 minutes. And been wearing that. And, maybe that's helping with the VO2 max as well. So I'm kind of just putting it all together. And, I usually do more than one thing, so it's really hard to figure it all out to see, oh, it has to be this or it has to be that. It's hard to tell, but I think if you're putting it all together, then it kind of works out in that kind of way. So yeah, I mean, I can't complain because my VO2 max is going up, which is a great indicator, I think, of longevity. Also, you're just your health in general, with running at least. People with high VO2 maxes, they're gonna be the winners of races usually, and it can go up, depending on how young you are. You could see some 90s, 80s. Yeah, it's always good to get that number up, I guess. I will see if I can get it into the 5s. So 50, that would be neat. Maybe once I feel like my injury is healed 100%, maybe I'll start to do some training, VO2 max training with some staircases or something, and get that up and see if I can push to 50. But until then, I appreciate you guys listening, and hopefully this was helpful for the ladies and give you some more ideas of what to do on the trail during your cycles. And yeah, thanks for listening, and keep moving, and I'll talk to you on the next episode.